Oh, and we're live. Hello, folks. Just popped on a wee bit early just to check that our microphone and camera's all good. As usual, I'm looking a little bit small today there. Well, let's just lower that a wee bit. It's not too bad. I'll just do a wee test on the... Just a wee walk around. I'm kind of curious to see how that sounds on this microphone with the settings that it has. I've tried playing a couple of wee things before, and they've not kind of sounded quite right, and it's probably because of the way I have the microphone set up. Otherwise, I'd probably play a few more tunes with my bad old hands. But that's another one of our little science fiction station tunes. But anyway, it's 9 o'clock, folks. I'm feeling really short tonight. Hang on. Must be the chair, is it? No, it's not. It's the camera. Bear with me a wee second. Let's just get that sorted a wee bit. I think. There we go. That's not too bad. I think that's a bit better. But anyway, sorry, it's 9 o'clock, folks. I'll say hello. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm Dr. Sloan. Welcome to my science fiction station here on YouTube, also known as the Doghouse. We're looking at chapter 17 of Dune Messiah tonight. And we should have been on last night, but in all honesty, folks, I got snowed under with work because I ended up picking up a bunch of new students that I had to free up an extra day for tuition, and it was all kind of higher math stuff, so I kind of had to put my little head to work and do some practice stuff, etc., make sure I knew what I was doing okay. So as always, if we can't make it on a Thursday, we'll try our best to go on a Friday. So I hope you are able to join me tonight. Anyway, there's Bojack saying, "Hey, I got to leave for work." And I was like, Bojack, thank you very much for joining us as always. So I really do like to keep it, Thursdays. Try and keep it regular. It's a wee bit tricky to work out sometimes, but we've been doing pretty well with Dune Messiah, to be honest with you. No sizable gaps or anything like that. So it's nice just to push on with it. And anybody who can't sort of make it live, joining us for the live broadcast, hopefully is catch up, So yeah, I've got a really good chapter tonight with the introduction of arguably what you'd call quite a major character, but like almost all the characters in the Dune series, most of the major characters are actually minor characters, and that's of course Bijaz that we're talking about. And we've got some quite interesting stuff to look at tonight, I think. Just in relation to what pops up in this chapter, excuse me. And what else? Oh yeah. Got on a few bits and pieces from some people. So first of all, the person I would call X-Z, call you X-Ray Zulu if that's easier. But just as always, thank you very much for the wee emails that you sent me. And there's Sootpot saying, "Hi Doc, sounds all good. How you doing, Sootpot? Thank you very much. I sent you a wee reply as well there." So yeah, something that X-Ray Zulu had pointed out, really XZ as they're known as. And it was just to let, if he's listening, just to let, or they're listening, I'm not even sure if they're a he. That yeah, one of the things that you were quite keen to see pointed out, from Frank Herbert, we're going to point it out tonight because as much as I thought it might be a thing that we would be waiting to God Emperor of Dune to get to, it's actually kind of relevant tonight. So we're going to have a wee quick chat at some point about the Golden Path and a couple of other things as well. But yeah, it's an interesting enough wee chapter. I've also got a couple of wee things in from people who are science fiction authors, I suppose, asking me to review their stuff. As much as I would love to do such a thing, the time doesn't really allow. But I'm hoping to do another wee kind of Sci-Fi Friday if we can get our book schedule back online, and hopefully like to do a wee bit. We'll try and plug their stuff if we can. So let me just see, but we'll maybe have a wee go at that tonight actually, just while we remember. Oh, hang on a wee second. I really appreciate it. The job would be wonderful. Ah, excellent. EPUB found by. Well, yeah, very quickly then. I've just got this wee thing in from Matt Charles. I was going to keep this for another night, but we could do it very quickly now. We're always about all things science fiction here, and if I get a wee link here, I'll be able to pop it on the screen for you. There we go. Now this is. I'll just thanks, Sootpot. I'll catch up with that later, mate. Thank you, and I hope you're looking after yourself and the recovery is going well. So there's a wee link to a book by. Let me see. This is. Bear with me a wee second. This is Matt Charles, and I'll just read you the blurb that he's sent me. So I was just saying to Matt in the wee email that I have very little time, and the amount of books that I've got to kind of get through has, like all things, stacked up. And I've just managed to cover a year's worth of correspondence in a day the other day, and then to my major shock, it wasn't enough. So I've still got about another year's worth of correspondence to get through, I think. I'm going to hit it again on another day this week. But just to say, this is from Matt. He says, "Hi, Doc, Sloan Science Fiction Station. I'm Matt Charles, an astrophysics graduate from Stanford, using my knowledge to craft realistic space combat narratives. I've written a thrilling book where climate change, terrestrial conflict, and space warfare collide in a high-stakes battle for survival." And he said he'd like to request that the book be reviewed on Doc Sloan Science Fiction Station. One day, possibly in the future, Matt, but it'll be a wee while. So this is just a bit about the story. It's in the near future. Matt's story is called To the Brink, by the way. It says, "In the near future, To the Brink plunges us into a world teetering on the edge of chaos. Follow the riveting journeys of Rob Ranta, a determined miner, Maria Delgado, a fearless test pilot, and Kenneth Hyde, an elite SEAL, as their lives intersect against the backdrop of a warming planet and rising global tensions. Rob's struggle against a controversial water pipeline spirals into a deadly conflict, propelling him from the mines of Michigan to the vastness of space. Maria, after a daring aerial battle that cements her as a combat ace, finds herself on the cutting edge of space warfare technology. Meanwhile, Kenneth's covert operations unravel a web of international intrigue, leading to a desperate mission in the cold vacuum of space." It's got quite a groovy wee cover there. There we go. As the trio converges aboard the groundbreaking Alan Shepard space station, they face off against formidable adversaries in a high-stakes battle for control of space resources. With the world watching, they navigate a deadly game of espionage, sacrifice, and courage, where the fate of nations hangs in the balance. To the Brink is a gripping tale of survival, ingenuity, and the relentless human spirit in the face of the ultimate crisis. And if you'd like to know more, we have the link there in the chat comments. So that's from Matt Charles. So it's nice to hear from science fiction writers. It's what we're all about on the station, isn't it? So if that's anybody's kind of thing, I suggest just check it out. It sounds interesting and seems to have some, I suppose, what we could call quite sort of modern environmental aspects to the book, I suppose. So there we are. But if that's your thing, that kind of action type sci-fi, check out Matt's book on Amazon there. There's Carlos Cruceres saying, "Hey Doc, hey guys," and Cynthia saying, "Hi Doc, hi all, hi folks, thanks very much for joining me." Carlos, I think I'm preparing another audiobook very shortly, and it's kind of the reason is something you said about wings. It was a comment about yourself, I think, from was it your kids or your grandkids, I think, the other day. So I'm going to be dedicating that one to you, but we'll keep the surprise. So yeah, we're going to start dedicating stuff to our hardcore members, if you like, our subscribers. So I'm looking forward to doing that and testing the old teeth out and seeing how that works. But yeah, I'm hoping to do this audiobook with a bit of it. We'll do it as a live premiere. It's not massively long. It's one of Lucien of Samosata's stories. And it's not a true history, the one that everybody mentions because that's all they know about him. So we're going to have a look at. I might make it a double bill, actually. Interestingly enough, but it's a story feature. I'm going to be doing a version of Icaromenopus. So I'm just trying to figure out the best way to read it at the minute. I'm going to try and get it recorded real soon, as in hopefully this week, if time allows. But there you go. We're keeping busy as always. Let me just tidy this up. I think I'm a bit lopsided or something. I don't know what it is today. Let me see. I'll move that way. Oh, but I'll move that. No, that way. I think that's a bit better, is it? There we go. This are my monitors very wobbly. Anyway, folks, let's make a wee start. So our epigraph is quite relevant to what's going on in this chapter. Production growth and income growth must not get out of step in my empire. That is the substance of my command. There are to be no balance of payment difficulties between the different spheres of influence, and the reason for this is simply because I command it. I want to emphasize my authority in this area. I am the supreme energy eater of this domain and will remain so, alive or dead. My government is the economy. Order in council, the Emperor Paul Muad'Dib. I suppose that kind of reeks of modern economics in some ways, that the only thing that we can have is growth. And it seems to be exponential in some ways. Perpetual, that's the word that I'm looking for. Economics must have perpetual growth by the looks of it. That's the way I look at it anyway today. Which is quite interesting. This is going to be relevant, I suppose, in relation to the Fremen characters that appear in this chapter. And it's probably, I suppose it's, having listened to a few things, I'm still listening to Frank Herbert's audio books, the audio tapes, if you like, of Frank's discussion. So I was listening to another 2 of them today. And some of this stuff is very much how Frank saw his own government, I suppose, at the time, the American government, So let's have a look. But that is an order in council from the Emperor Paul Muad'Dib, our historical epigraphs, if you like. And so we begin, folks. Let's get going. And as always, if you've got any wee comments or questions, etc., let me know. It's always good to throw this stuff in there and see what we can find out. I really like this chapter, by the way. I think it's well done. As usual, I found loads and loads of little mistakes in the chapter. And just before we got going, I suppose it really made me start thinking about Brian Herbert and his father's estate and how it's handled. And in particular, I suppose, how Brian Herbert only works with the Money Cow, the Dune series. And I think it was just in relation to what we were talking about with Christopher Tolkien and his father's work, putting that work together, editing it, making sure it's in a good way, if you like. And it's simply put, what I'm really interested in to know, actually, is this, that there's folio editions of Dune and Dune Messiah, etc., these books. Really, really expensive versions of these books, if you like. And I'm really wanting to know, are all the mistakes in those books? And what I really want to know is why no editor has done what we're doing, if you like, as a collective. But we're finding so many for such a popular set of books, and particularly this version, I suppose, of Dune, where we even have Peter de Vries pretty much with his name spelt wrong the entire way through the book. I think it's kind of appalling, and I'm starting to wonder why nobody's done something to fix these books. You always get a bit of errata here and there, but generally from one edition to another, I would expect them to be tidied, to be fixed. And just this many years down, I'm just kind of with a whole bunch of them here today, and I kind of wonder about it, because we seem to find quite a lot of them, There's Sean Wyland saying, good evening. The channel Lost Chord published a video called Foundations of Dune, juxtaposing Asimov's Foundation series and Herbert's Dune series. If you haven't seen already, check it out. Very good. I haven't actually. I'll make a wee note of that. Where's my notebook? I've got a book now for all this kind of stuff, because the amount of recommendations and things that come in is ridiculous, and I do try to get to as many of these things as possible. Let's see, we'll get them in order. There we go. Where's my pen? XZ sent me a wee thing about people who use pens. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it sounded quite interesting. Let's see, channel Lost Chord. Yeah, that work's already been done, I suppose. Sean, whose is it? there's a number of comparisons between Herbert's Foundation and Herbert's Dune series and Asimov's Foundation. That was terrible of me, wasn't it? And hang on, let me get one. The main one I think you'll find is Donald E. Palumbo's work. So I have started to behave, big love. Oh, I'm getting barked at. I've only just walked them as well. Let me see. So this book is Chaos Theory, Asimov's Foundation and Robots and Herbert's Dune. There we go. Quite an old book now. Fractal Aesthetic of Epic Science Fiction. It's a really good book in terms of Frank's work, but it focuses on Asimov's Foundation series, Asimov's Robots series of novels, and then Herbert's Dune series. And I suppose that there's a fair amount of order to chaos, chaos to order kind of stuff, if you like, within the two types of galactic empires. The idea that Dune is order to chaos is Dune, chaos to order is Asimov, and it basically looks at what you would know as the themes and themes within themes, this kind of thing, and it's a pretty good sort of go at that. So there you go. But I will check it out. The interesting thing is that there's a fair amount of plagiarism on YouTube, I think. Some of it involving my own work, and it's not just on YouTube. It's partly for the... Yeah, I've seen a few things that it's just... hang on, I've watched the video on a particular topic, and then it's particularly with all the new Dune stuff lately. I've seen another video or two doing basically the same thing, From my point of view, I suppose I'm here to educate. So if my work's carried on out there, I'm not too bothered about it. The only thing that bothers me is if someone takes my work and does it wrong. If you see what I mean, plagiarizes my work and messes it up. I'm not particularly bothered by such things, But Jim was heavily influenced by Frank's use of ritual mushrooms in Mexico. Yeah, the Herbert's drug experiences, if you believe Brian Herbert, they're not great. They're minor, very minor, and I don't know if that's to the point where I would say they're virtually nil. I would put it that Frank lost his as how we would put it, the psilocybin mushrooms. He lost his virginity with those and possibly smoked weed about once. The best that I can take, but he's certainly no heavy drug user, as far as I can tell, and certainly some of Herbert's ideas about drugs within the Dune series aren't that bang on, to be honest with you. Especially when how is it that melange is described as a spectrum awareness narcotic, and I don't think it's a narcotic at all, not in the true sense of the word. But there you go. But yeah, I've seen a few things like that as well, Carlos. I'm pretty sure there's a chapter in... Hang on, I'll grab it here. Big one and a little one. Dreamer of Dune about this, as I recall, but I don't think it was a big thing. Japanese knotwood written down in that for some reason. Let me just see. No, I don't. There's no chapter like getting high with Frank Herbert, that kind of thing. But I'll have a wee look to see if I can figure it out where it was. I'm sure I've referenced it at some point, probably. But I've highlighted this book quite a bit. But that's kind of where I got my information on that from, if you like, I'm trying to figure out really some of the stuff about that, but some of the ideas that you get, I'll maybe keep that for another time. I was about to say something, but I'm not too sure if I'll be talking nonsense or not, Carlos. Excuse me. But certainly within mythography, there's a lot of interest in that kind of thing, ritualistic use of mushrooms, particularly within religions and stuff. And Robert Graves's work points heavily towards that. Just that's what I was wondering, when did that come out? The book I'm thinking on. Bear with me a second. There he is. Is the White Goddess? Yeah, which is certainly available within, it's first published in 1948. And that's a book that looks at that heavily. The Greek myths by Graves cover that as well, Sea Georgie. Are we going there straight away? Sea Georgie. No, I'm not too sure. Well, certainly, I suppose if you look at it, the orgiastic kind of, how would we put it, nature of the Fremen, and how they go about their business, if you like, is what we would call a religious mystery. And for we we know a fair bit about it within the ancient world, for example. I think I've chatted a bit about it before. Aeschylus is an interesting person to look at there, because he kind of wanted to know what the Eleusinian, if I believe correctly, mysteries were. Well, we like our Aeschylus here in this house. The father of tragedy. Now, my understanding was that he was prosecuted for doing this, but he figured out that it was a combination of booze and magic mushrooms, basically. And I have a funny feeling there's... goodness, we're making before we get cracking here, folks. Let me see. Robert Graves, where are we? I've got 2 copies of this stuff, but where do we go? Where would he be? It's a particular copy I have. I think there's a little magic mushroom inside it. If I remember correctly, I might be wrong. Doo-doo-doo. Where did you go, sir? I really must get my book sorted out. No, I'm not finding him, and I don't want to waste your time, folks. I'll see if I can dig it out for next time. I've got a couple of copies of his books. My problem is books. Sorry about that. My problem is that books that I left off the shelf quite a lot, which that will be one of them. I have a tendency not to put them back where I found them, unfortunately. And I've got lots of rubbish stacked up here at the minute, so it's not making stuff like that easily found. But yeah, that's pretty much what the mysteries were, I suppose. They're sort of Bacchiantic type things, if you like. Magic mushrooms, alcohol, sex, and the gods being involved in it, that kind of thing, but let me just see if I can quickly find something here on Wikipedia, actually. Here we go. What's this? Aeschylus was one of many Greeks who were initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, an ancient cult of Demeter based in his hometown of Eleusis. According to Aristotle, Aeschylus was accused of asabaia, which is impiety. There we go. For revealing some of the cult's secrets on stage. Other sources claim that an angry mob tried to kill him on the spot, but he fled the scene. Heraclides of Pontus asserts that the audience tried to stone Aeschylus. Aeschylus took refuge at the altar in the orchestra of the Theatre of Dionysus. He pleaded ignorance at his trial. He was acquitted, with the jury sympathetic to the military service of him and his brothers during the Persian Wars. There we go. According to the 2nd century author Otheym, Aeschylus' younger brother Amenius helped to acquit Aeschylus by showing the jury the stump of the hand he had lost at Salamis, where he was voted bravest warrior. The truth is that the award for bravery at Salamis went not to Aeschylus' brother, but to Amenius of Pallene. Much like a modern court, lots of lying, per the looks of it. But there you go. So he was prosecuted for it. But my understanding is that that's what he revealed. This was alcohol and magic mushrooms, basically. But there you go. But yeah, it's good to check out other. I like checking out Dune channels and people's stuff out there. There's a lot of stuff appearing at the minute, isn't there? Some of it's quite good, some of it's quite interesting. There's one I saw recently, which was going on about, I suppose, Tolkien, and I suppose Herbert, and I'd watched a good video about that ages ago and had actually commented on it and went, well done to the person that wrote it, because I didn't know about it, and I thought it was a good video. But it's little things, like that, I suppose. And YouTube's a wee bit like that, I suppose. Interestingly enough, I suppose somebody was asking me about how do you reference a video academically. And it's not that difficult. I'll maybe do a wee thing about that some night, Anyway, folks, let's get cracking. But yeah, I will check that out. Sean, thank you very much. So let's see. This starts with Razir, who we met in the previous chapter. This is the old man who's the guide that Banerjee has found for Paul. So it begins with him saying, "I will leave you here," the old man said, taking his hand from Paul's sleeve. "It is on the right, second door from the far end. Go with Shai Halud Muad'Dib, and remember when you were Usul." Paul's guide slipped away into the darkness. There would be security men. I always like that security has a capital S here constantly within my book anyway. Somewhere out there waiting to grab the guide and take the man to a place of questioning. Paul knew, but Paul found himself hoping the old man would escape. Hoping. Hope is an interesting word within this chapter, I suppose. I'll just put a wee ring around that one. It depends on what we think about hope. We're told there were stars overhead and the distant light of first moon somewhere beyond the shield wall, but this place was not the open desert where a man could sight on a star to guide his course. The old man brought him into one of the new suburbs. This much Paul recognized. My own kind of little sort of subnote, to this chapter is I've called it the Fremen of Suburbia. A wee bit of a joke, I suppose, on the Buddha of Suburbia, but yes, we've got Fremen in Suburbia, and possibly an Abigail's party going on around somewhere. And it's very interesting to think of them living in a suburb as opposed to what we know living in sieges, if you like. So we're told the street now was thick with sand blown in from encroaching dunes. And I've made a little note here that that's how it all started for Frank Herbert. Was going to Oregon and supposedly preparing to write an article about, they stopped the moving sands, I believe it was to be called, which was all about sand dune encroachment into farmland, etc., around Oregon. And very interesting, I think we talked a wee bit about this a few weeks back there. Somebody had sent me a wee thing again, I think it might have been XZ, I was having a wee look at it, that I believe Oregon is now having a kind of a bit of an environmental disaster, or environmental problem, should we say, maybe not using the word disaster, in that I think they're losing their desert, which is an interesting thing, I suppose. And it's kind of ironic in many ways if you think about the whole idea of long-term thinking, the use of barrier grasses to protect the town, etc., etc. Meant to be maybe a kind of natural way of dealing with a problem like this. And I suppose dust and desert encroachment were a huge problem in America for what was known as the Dirty 30s, I suppose, the Dust Bowl period, which was pretty much caused by the massive overproduction of wheat and the use of the combine harvester, really. Very interesting time. I think someone who teaches English, I suppose John Steinbeck is the chronicler of the Dust Bowl period, really, isn't he? And things like, I suppose if you look at things like Of Mice and Men, covering sort of itinerant workers from that period, and then you've got things like To Kill a Mockingbird, I suppose, which is really, well, it would not be written around 1960 or something like that, but that period of time is that story set in is the Dust Bowl, and you get to see an example of, economic practices within that, on how it affected farmers, etc., and all this kind of stuff. So those are quite good books for looking at that, as much as they're fiction, for looking at the Dust Bowl, I suppose. And of course, oh goodness, Paul Bigelow Sears, his work on deserts from that time as well is quite interesting. That's the kind of ecologist, I suppose, that Frank Herbert's go-to guy. So there we go. That's how it all began, really. I think it's just kind of interesting that we've got this little comment here. This street now was thick with sand blown in from encroaching dunes. Pardon me. A dim light glowed from a single public dispenser globe far down the street, and it gave enough illumination to show that this was a dead-end street, so a bit of a cul-de-sac. Now we're told the air around him was thick with the smell of a reclamation still. The thing must be poorly kept for its fetid odours to escape, loosing a dangerously wasteful amount of moisture into the night air. How careless his people had grown, Paul thought. They were millionaires of water, forgetful of the days when a man on Arrakis could have been killed for just an eighth share of the water in his body. Pardon me. Now, I suppose maybe just point this out before we get cracking here. We've got a lot of dichotomies in this chapter, a lot of opposites, a lot of contradictions, and a lot of paradox. And also, we should be well aware now that a foul smell equals evil, equals bad stuff in this book. Certainly to the Fremen, which often makes me think about Paul's foul-smelling feet. But particularly, I suppose, the contrast between water and dust, water and sand. And I suppose also we'll have the contrast of plain speaking and talking in riddles. There's quite a few things here. And also the contrast. So the Fremen should be millionaires of water, forgetful of the days when a man on Arrakis could have been killed for just an eighth share of the water in his body. And it makes you kind of think, where is all this water? If that's the case, how, where does someone store their personal wealth? And it makes you think, actually, of the Fremen moving from a communal society, basically, where water is respected and collectively owned. And we're told in Dune that, whenever we see these huge catchments, these water basins, if you like, that not one of these Fremen, no matter how desperate their need, would dare touch that water. And this in particular, I suppose, this little suburb really does point out what has happened to the Fremen. This incredible kind of people who, through necessity, have built up systems of living and reliance and codependency on each other. So there's a stark contrast, between the Fremen that we know from Dune and the ones that we see in this chapter here, and particularly with I suppose the economics of this world as well. The particular thing that that's mentioned within the epigraph is that there's to be no balance of payment difficulties, because this is what Paul wants, and we're going to see how that works in this chapter, if you like. So we get lots of Paul's thoughts here. I suppose the other big contrast before we pile on is the difference between how would I put it? Seeing the future one way and how it actually turns out, if you like. So Paul's thoughts here: why am I hesitating? He wondered. Paul wondered. It's the second door from the far end. I knew that without being told. But this thing must be played out with precision. So I hesitate. We have to start asking, and we've mentioned this a little bit here, that does Paul have any free will at all? And I think it's kind of important to consider this. in light of it, it's the major thing that will either make him a hero in a certain sense of the word, if you like, or not, if you see what I mean. And again, this, Paul is meant to be a warning to us from the author. So we hear the noise of an argument arose suddenly from the corner house on Paul's left. A woman there berated someone. And here's her words. The new wing of their house leaked dust, she complained. Did he think water fell from heaven? If dust came in, moisture got out. And Paul's thoughts here, some remember. And I suppose that's one of the female voices in this chapter. And I think the other female voice, which is Dhuri, is similar in terms of remembering the old ways, this kind of thing. There's Rolando Sada saying, howdy, Rolando, we've just got started. We're just on the second page there. Thanks very much for joining us. Hope you're keeping well. So we're told he moved down the street and the quarrel faded away behind. Water from heaven, Paul thought. Some Fremen had seen that wonder on other worlds. He had seen it himself, had ordered it for Arrakis. But the memory of it felt like something that had occurred to another person. Ordered it for Arrakis. I really should have highlighted that bit. is a heck of a way of putting it, isn't it? It's basically this weather control satellites, but I want rain on this planet. We're told, but the memory of it felt like something that had occurred to another person. Now, rain, it was called. Now, I've just thought that was quite interesting. Excuse me, especially if you think about David Lynch's Dune and how it ends. And of course, the major thing that we all talk about is, it rained, didn't it? And we kind of go, that couldn't possibly happen. It did happen. It does happen. It just doesn't happen there. And the fact that Paul has ordered it for Arrakis, the idea probably of weather control being that he can have maybe rain in specific areas, this kind of thing. There's all sorts of this stuff going on at the minute. Is it firing silver nitrate into clouds, this kind of thing? Let me see. Cloud seeding. So the storm systems move through cloud seeding project areas. A solution containing a small amount of silver iodide is burned from ground-based generators released from aircraft. Upon reaching the cloud, the silver iodide acts as an ice-forming nuclei to aid in the production of snowflakes. That's just a bit of blurb from the Desert Research Institution. Cloud seeding. That's what it's called. I'm not sure that's a good idea. But I must have a look at that Wikipedia page. There's quite a lot of stuff there, actually. Let me just bookmark that. I'll pop that into science fiction. There we go. But the idea of weather control. Weather control would be quite funny in Judge Dredd, if anybody's a Judge Dredd fan. It's a great way of controlling the population. It's what often was it one of those ones where Judge Dredd cancels Christmas, and the Justice Department just put out a whole list of really bad things that are happening, including acid rain and stuff. And they have weather control; they control. So it's a way of keeping everybody off the streets. So I just thought that was another interesting thing about and just made me think, that the ending to David Lynch's Dune. Especially with the time constraints of that film, etc. It's not that far off at all, really. It's something that does happen. It just doesn't happen at that point, if you like. So rain, it was called. And abruptly, he recalled a rainstorm on his birth world. Clouds thick and grey in the sky of Caladan, an electric storm presence, moist air, the big wet drops drumming on the skylights. It ran in rivulets off the eaves. Storm drains took the water away to a river which ran muddy and turgid past the family orchards. Trees there with their barren branches glistening wetly. Great contrast to Arrakis there. Paul's foot, we're told, caught in a low drift of sand across the street. For an instant, he felt mud clinging to the shoes of his childhood. Then he was back in the sand, in the dust, clotted, wind-muffled darkness, with the future hanging over him, haunting. Excuse me. He could feel the aridity of his life around him like an accusation. You did this. They'd become a civilization of dry-eyed watchers and tale-tellers who solved all problems with power and still more power, hating every erg of it. I suppose one of the things that Carlos, who was it? Sorry, not Carlos. Sean had mentioned there earlier, but the channel Lost Chord published a video called Foundations of Dune, juxtaposing Asimov's Foundation series and Herbert's Dune series. One of the things I suppose is that Herbert did not like Asimov's type of science fiction. The technological wonder, the idea that all of our problems can be solved with more technology. He wasn't fond of that. I suppose it's one of the points of this story, I think. But there's a bit of a suggestion of it there. Power. And from whence does that power come? They become a civilization of dry-eyed watchers and tale-tellers who solved all problems with power and still more power, hating every erg of it. Hating it. That's interesting. It really does show how much the Fremen have, at least the Fremen on Arrakis, have fallen, I think. How far away they've moved from their siege life, if you like. It's interesting. We've got modern day analogues to this kind of thing. You see people who've won the lottery, who've been poor their entire lives, and they suddenly get all these millions of pounds, and a lot of people don't handle it well. And certainly there's been quite a few examples of people who've had all this ridiculous amount of money. They've been poor all their lives. They've won the lottery. And they seem to, we're talking millions of pounds, and they seem to blow it pretty quickly. And they don't seem to be happy, I think, is the other thing, It's interesting. I often thought if I got rich, I'd be dead in a week. It's, something I don't want. Makes life too easy. I think that's an illusion, isn't it? It gives you the idea that life will be very easy, but I don't think it solves your problems. So I think there's also a lot of good writing there with Frank here, just these analogies, the contrast of Caladan, a world rich in water, with Arrakis, a world that had no rain, and now that it's got it, if you like, it's this changing world, and the Fremen that are changing with it, dry-eyed watchers and tale-tellers. Doesn't sound like them at all, does it? And as ultimately we'll get to, whenever we get to the God Emperor of Dune, we'll see the very, very last kind of remnants of the Fremen, the museum Fremen, Cynthia saying in Dune, satellites were forbidden to keep knowledge of the Fremen from the Guild and others, so now this knowledge of the planet is available. I think so. How do you order rain? I think they've got nothing to hide anymore. They're in power, and they've taken over the trappings of power, if you like. And I'd imagine also quite a lot of them are probably off-world fighting. But yeah, there's no need to. I suppose also we get the sense that all the pilgrims and stuff that the Fremen have kind of become a bit of a tourist industry. We'll get some of that as we move down this chapter. Cynthia saying, Carlos agreed, though I wonder if allowing this kind of observation accelerated the suburbanization of the Fremen. You kind of think that there's plenty of them that wouldn't want to change, though. That there are always people who are conservative that aren't maybe the Fremen, the ultimate conservatives, I don't know, with a small c, if you see what I mean. But then they don't need to be. What is it they say? As any revolutionary power upon any kind of revolutionary group. I don't know who said this, and I'm paraphrasing, but whenever they attain power, they by nature must become conservative. To to hang on to that power. It's an interesting idea. But yeah, I get that the guild, the Fremen are constantly paying these bribes to the guild. They don't need to do that anymore either. And those bribes, I think, were enormous, weren't they? In terms of melange, which would translate to salaries, to wealth, to cash. Where were we? Sorry, folks. Let me see. Yeah, and also this accusation, by the way, just prior to that, you did this. The aridity of his life around him, like an accusation, the dryness of it all. But he did this, and it's him that ordered the real. So we're told rough stones came underfoot. His vision remembered them. The dark rectangle of a doorway appeared on his right. Black and black, Otheym's house, Fate's house, a place different from the ones around it, only in the role time had chosen for it. It was a strange place to be marked down in history. And the door opened to his knock. The gap revealed the dull green light of an atrium. A dwarf peered out, ancient face on a child's body, an apparition prescience had never seen. So again, with this is Bijaz, of course, and we have this one of these juxtapositions, if you like, an ancient face. It's described as a child's body, so we have ancient and youthful, if you like, elderly and child in one. You've come then, the apparition said. The dwarf stepped aside, no awe in his manner, merely the gloating of a slow smile. Come in, come in. Paul hesitated. There'd been no dwarf in the vision, but all else remained identical. This is a very, very important here, I think. This could contain such disparities and still hold true to their original plunge into infinity. But, there's the but, the difference dared him to hope. He glanced back up the street at the creamy pearl glistening of his moon, swimming out of jagged shadows. The moon haunted him. How did it fall? The dwarf said, sorry, come in, the dwarf insisted. I think it's just very interesting what we're going to see in this chapter, but what we've already learned. Visions contain such disparities, but still hold true to their original plunge into infinity. We're going to have a wee chat about that in a little bit. And essentially the nature of the golden path and what it's all about. So come in, the dwarf insisted. Paul entered, heard the door thud into its moisture seals behind. The dwarf passed him, led the way, enormous feet slapping the floor, opened the delicate lattice gate into the roofed central courtyard, gestured. They await, sire. And Paul's thoughts here, sire, he knows me then. So despite the Fremen disguise, the limp, etc., that we learned he put on in the last chapter, this dwarf recognizes Paul. And we're told before Paul could explore this discovery, the dwarf slipped away down a side passage. Hope was a dervish wind whirling, dancing in Paul. He headed across the courtyard. It was dark. It was a dark and gloomy place, the smell of sickness and defeat in it. He felt daunted by the atmosphere. Was it defeat to choose a lesser evil? He wondered. How far down this track had he come? Sorry, I missed that wee bit in this. I'm just going to color that. That's Paul. So Paul's yellow in this. No, I think it's kind of interesting. With just simply that there are differences in his vision than what actually really happens. The suggestion is that they're minor differences, but I don't know. It simply put, things aren't quite always the way he sees them, and that should give him hope. I think that there's some element of free will, and hope is an interesting thing in this chapter. And I've always thought that the nature of hope is a little bit paradoxical. Certainly in terms of the Greek myths, if you like. In Greek mythology, hope is called elpis, and elpis. If you go to the story of Pandora and her box, Pandora is the first woman in Greek mythology, and she marries Epimetheus, who's the brother of Prometheus. Prometheus means forethought. Epimetheus means afterthought. Quite interestingly, their other brother is Atlas, I believe. And Prometheus warns both of them not to accept a gift from the gods. So, of course, this box is given to Pandora as a wedding present, and despite the warning from Prometheus, and she opens it, of course. Depending on what version you read, it's a bit like the apple I won't say apple, the fruit in the Garden of Eden. There's an idea that Adam ate it and blamed Eve. It's kind of the same in Greek mythology. The idea is that Epimetheus opened it, not Pandora. But regardless of who opened it, if you like, so Epimetheus opened it and blamed her, if you like. The idea is that whoever opens the box, basically, it's everything, all the evils in the world are inside that box. And whenever the box is opened, they all fly out into the world, and at the last minute, they close the box. And depending on how you look at it, Elpis is inside the box, and there's two ways of looking at it. One is that there is no hope in the world because it's locked inside the box. The other way of looking at it is that hope is kept in the box for the day it's needed. If you see, and one day will be let out. It's a great story, a very interesting one of my favorites in Greek mythology. But yeah, we get a few things with hope with Paul in this chapter. That he dares to hope, I think, and it suggests that he's still trying to get some sort of control of his life back, if you like. But otherwise, we really do have to kind of look at whether he has any free will or not. And he's almost like an actor here, if you see what I mean. The other thing that, let me see. There's timing within this chapter. And it is almost like Paul's following directions, if you like. It's the directions that he's following are those of the vision. But where he hesitates, waits, this kind of thing, waits to hear a certain thing because he's seen it. Now, we're told that light poured from a narrow doorway in the far wall. He put down the feeling of watchers and evil smells, entered the doorway into a small room, and we're told it was a barren place by Fremen standards, with high-rig hangings on only 2 walls. Opposite the door, a man sat on carmine cushions beneath the best hanging. A feminine figure hovered in shadows behind another doorway in a barren wall to the left. Barren used there twice. And we're told that Paul felt vision trapped. This was the way it had gone. Where was the dwarf? Where was the difference? I've just written next to that. It's a good question. Why doesn't he know? Why are these changes in his vision, if you like? So we're told that his senses absorbed the room in a single gestalten sweep. The place had received painstaking care despite its poor furnishings. Hooks and rods across the barren walls showed where hangings had been removed. Pilgrims paid enormous prices for authentic Fremen artifacts, Paul reminded himself. Rich pilgrims counted desert tapestries as treasures, true marks of a Hajj. So true marks of the pilgrimage, if you like. The suggestion, we've got the word barren there 3 times. It's coming up again. It's 4th. There's 4. Paul felt that the barren walls accused him. With their fresh gypsum wash, the threadbare condition of the two remaining hangings amplified the sense of guilt. So, yeah, barren is the word that's being used to talk. I mean, we've heard this. How was it put earlier? The Fremen. Let me just see. They'd all become millionaires of water. Was that it? Yeah, they were millionaires of water, forgetful of the days when a man on Arrakis should have been killed for just an eighth share of the water in his body. This place is barren. Barren. And he feels guilt over this. Why would he feel guilt? Well, if we look at our epigraph, production growth, income growth, the substance of his command, there's no balance of payment difficulties, not in his empire, not between different spheres of influence, and because he commands it, it's his authority that says so. He is the supreme energy eater, and you'd imagine that all wealth, ultimately, if you think about taxation, etc., flows towards him. And yet, this is the house of one of his faithful death commandos, one of his faithful Fedaykin. Accusation, sense of guilt. So we're told a narrow shelf occupied the wall. Well, the other thing is that there's still pride in this room, if you like, that the paint, what is left, that the hangings have been obviously sold to tourists. But what the place had received painstaking care despite its poor furnishings. So the place, regardless of the poverty that the place suggests, it's looked after well. A narrow shelf occupied the wall on his right. It held a row of portraits, mostly bearded Fremen, some in imperial uniforms. Some in imperial uniforms posed against exotic off-world backgrounds. Apologies, that's my bad handwriting. That's an A looking like an O. I'm very sloppy with some of my writing sometimes. The most common scene was a seascape. I think that's really interesting. That's it's almost, if you think about the Fremen, I suppose as much as they're off on exotic worlds, they're not there as tourists themselves, but they're getting their snaps and their photos. Check me out against the sea, this kind of thing. As we're dealing with the local population, it's one of those kind of things, if you like. But the most common scene was a seascape. And this must be just, an incredible wonder to the Fremen. Until they've left Arrakis, they've never seen such a thing. Never seen the sea. I went to university with a guy I'd never seen when I was in my early 20s. He came over here, actually, but until he came here, he'd never seen the sea. And I thought that was bonkers. He was living in England. And I thought, well, England's an island, isn't it? It's not that big. In fact, I think he's a Londoner. Actually, I find that really bizarre. But I've known someone who had never seen the sea, and I'm sure there's people from landlocked countries who, whenever they see it for the first time, I suppose television and things like that allow us to see things from countries that we've never been to. Which is part of the wonder of technology. As Cynthia saying, the word barren refers back to Chani as well. Paul has just asked how the moon fell. How does he lose Chani? From the side effects of the drug that made her barren. Very good point. That's a really good connection there, Cynthia. Thank you. We're going to see something about that actually when Bijaz talks to Paul. The double meaning of sire and sired, I think, is relevant to that as well. Excellent, thank you. Yes, indeed. Yeah, there's a couple of comments about Chani in this that I don't think are particularly well. We'll see when we get to them, I suppose. But I like the idea of all of the. I love the idea of Fremen, the idea of Fremen postcards, Fremen photographs and portraits taken against a sea, if you like. I think that's quite cool. I like the idea of it. It sounds, I wonder what these would look like actually. The sense of, how do Fremen pose for photographs and portraits, this kind of thing. The Fremen on the cushion cleared his throat, forcing Paul to look at him. It was Otheym, precisely as the vision had revealed him. Neck grown scrawny, a bird thing which appeared too weak to support the large head. His face was a lopsided ruin, networks of crisscrossed scars on the left cheek below a drooping wet eye, but clear skin on the other side and a straight blue in blue Fremen gaze. A long, hang on, that's my handwriting defeating me again. Let me just jump over. Where are we? Number 22. A long kedge. A long kedge of a nose bisected the face. That's it. Sorry, that was my handwriting. I wasn't sure about that. I thought it might have been a misprint. Kedge is it with reference to a boat. Mover being moved by hauling in a hawser attached to a distance to a small anchor. Interesting. From the Old English cadge, perhaps a specific use of dialect cadge bind tie. I had thought that might have been ledge, if you see what I mean, but I think that's the right word. There's Chris saying, it's been a while since my last read of the series, and this may be a dumb question, but what was the need for the Jihad if all of the house accepted Paul as their emperor? He controlled the spice. It's not a dumb question, Chris. Not at all. We're going to get a wee comment about it, I think, in this as in this chapter itself. And whether it needs to happen is one thing. The suggestion, I think, is that it will happen just because the Fremen want it to. That it's possibly an expression of their see Paul dodge the Jihad. It's always just been a thing that Paul wanted to avoid, but and I don't really buy into that. I think he's up for it himself, but why? And it's the suggestion is, but Paul is cruel. If you like, I can provide evidence for that, but I'd need to back it up with more stuff, to be honest with you. But I think there's a turning point with Paul. And it's when his son, Leto, the first Leto, the second, when his son is killed. It depends on how you read it. But I think we talked about this is a statement he makes about how little the universe knows the nature of real cruelty. But you could read it a different way, in a sympathetic way. How little does the nature know universe know the nature of real cruelty? Is it a sympathetic thing when he's talking about it? Is it the cruelty done to him, or is it him getting ready for it? But there's a point where I think I think that is the point where he just accepts it. And off he goes. But I don't know. If he's an emperor, he could certainly prevent it. That's for certain. But there's a couple of wee comments about it. Remember some talk of human urges and war. Oh, well, there's that book, which I'm always trying to remember. I've even got a copy of it. Let me see if I can find the name of it. Sexual cycle of human warfare. That's what we're after. Is the book Bear with me a wee second. I'll just copy this here, and I'll give you a bit of info on it. I can never remember the exact title of it. I always think it's the. I just typed in the search. I type in is that I always think it's called the sexual rhythms of human warfare. It's the sexual cycle of human warfare. That's my old memory not being so hot there. Bear with me a wee second. And you can get a copy of this online for free. I think it's published in the 1950s. Where are we? Sexual cycle. Yeah, it's published in it's 1950. This is Norman Walters, the author, and that's one of the big influences on Dune, on Frank Herbert's thinking. Anyway, it's a highly discredited book. Certainly that there's cyclical things within human nature, but they're not all about sex, I think. But yeah, it's quite possible it's just overdue. It's about time it happened. But I think if it's the Fremen who are mainly out doing it. But I suppose in partly it's to bring the religion as well as the rule of Muad'Dib to the many worlds of the empire. But we're going to get a wee comment about it. But that's the book I think you're talking about. The human urges, war. Yeah, just it's to do with rhythms, sexual rhythms, this kind of thing. The God Emperor will go into it a bit more, I suppose. But the idea of renewing the species, that war will wipe out X, Y, and Z, and through that, the idea of soldiers, particularly, I suppose, tend to try and breed before they go to war, or tend to try and be a bit rapey when they're at war, if you like. But it's interesting if you look at it, I suppose. But the need to mix the genes, yeah, that kind of thing. It doesn't really work that way, I suppose. Maybe it does. Northern Ireland, where I'm from, we have cenotaphs in every town, pretty much, to do with World War One and World War Two and more recent wars, but particularly the Great War, the First World War. Our population got slaughtered, and the old send the Irish in kind of thing, particularly at things like the Battle of the Somme. Where the effects of this, as much as talk about renewing human genes, the effects of this are really starting to hit hard. And in particular with a lost generation there. And then we, particularly, I suppose, Ireland recovering from things like the famine, the Great Famine. There's actually a series of famines that hits Ireland in the 19th century, but kind of end in the big one. And what that did to our population was incredible. That our population is only just recovering from it now, but in terms of the demographic, if you like, it's especially with the baby boomers after World War II, we've got a massive shift in our population, and you can see it in places like Japan as well, where we have a vast amount of elderly people. The boomers all about to retire, and then I suppose what you would call Generation X is the one that's kind of coming to the fore now, that does most of the work, and what we've got is prior to us is I suppose millennials and Generation Z, this kind of thing, who don't seem too keen on working too much. But there's a bit of a, depends on who they are, I'm generalizing, of course, but there's a big imbalance in age demographics in our society starting to hit us, and I believe Japan sells more nappies now to the elderly than to the young, things like that, And Carlos is saying why Leto had the fish figures. Well, we're seeing a kind of evolution in female-only military groups, bodyguards, if you like, with Alia in this at the start. She has her Amazons, doesn't she? Ultimately, with I suppose mixing different groups like the Amazons and some Bene Gesserit, etc., you're going to end up with the Emperor's fish speakers. They're going to be quite interesting to look at. Herbert's got a lot of ideas about the military. We talk about them a fair bit, but he talks about the homosexual nature of the army in particular, and a few things. Again, this kind of idea. And again, they're Frank's ideas. and they're not too far off. But yeah, it's one of those things. I think with that I think is best I could do really with the Jihad. I still think it's Paul's fault, and we're talking about his sense of guilt, and particularly if we look previously. The Atreides seem to be more concerned about being blamed for stuff, and it's almost as if they didn't do it. And I suppose the point of Dune Messiah is the inversion of Frank's themes, if you like, but the sense that the various groups that form around an individual like Paul and how they sort of act and take power and do different things for control, if you like, all in kind of the name of the emperor or the admin, or and his administration. We got an example of that in the previous chapter where we were chatting about this new kind of religious bureaucrat, this new man who occupies all the middle spaces, if you like. So they're almost every group in this book, I suppose, and ultimately this is the one where we find we kind of already know that there are Fremen involved in the conspiracy, but this is where it's sort of proved to us, through Otheym. But everybody's kind of got an idea of what the emperor should do or how his universe should be ruled, and their part in it. It's a bit like, oh, he's my best buddy, this kind of thing. What would you do and say in the name of your emperor? And how close you can get to power. And with Paul being the ultimate energy eater of this domain, as we're told, and will remain so alive or dead, that's particularly interesting. And it's possibly part of it is mystery, if you like. Yeah, it's a good question, Chris. Not a silly question at all. I don't believe in daft questions at all. I think all questions are good. I don't know who said it, but I would go with this. Your problem begins when you run out of questions. If you've got no questions to ask, you're in trouble. You're probably dead or dying. But no, always happy to take any questions at all. Where do we get to? Let's see. Oh yeah, long kedge of a nose bisected the face. Yeah. So Otheym's cushion, we're told, sat in the center of a threadbare rug, brown with maroon and gold threads. The cushion fabric betrayed splotches of wear and patching, but every bit of metal around the seated figure shone from polishing. The portrait frames, shelf lip and brackets, the pedestal of a low table on the right. So as much as they don't have much, someone's taking care and effort to keep the place clean, to keep it tidy. I'm sure there was a comment about something polished from the desert, something like that, a long time ago. Was it wisdom or polish? Something like that. I think I'm mixing it up, aren't I? No, I'm not too sure, actually. Something comes from might have been. I don't know. I don't think I'm remembering correctly. Chris says, thanks, great. It's got no problem, Chris. No problem at all. Yeah, the Jihad, why does it go ahead and all? I suppose we're going to see some of the effects of it here as well. Otheym's kind of quite a tragic character in this sense, and Otheym is one of these Fedaykin from Dune. That there's not too many Fremen that we get to kind of meet and that kind of hang around with Paul, if you like. But Otheym is definitely one of them, So he's a character we should be familiar with from Dune, though he's not major, Who's the other one? Well, I suppose most of the Fremen that are named in Dune are kind of Fedaykin guys. It's Korba. Hang on, bear with me a second. I'm going to grab my first notebook here. Yeah, I've just opened it up actually. Blame. There you go. Not that bit, but that's Blame is a problem for these guys. Let me see. Farok as well. So Farok, um, Otheym, and Korba are kind of the three kind of Fedaykin, if you like, that we meet in, and I suppose oh goodness gracious, get the brain going. Oh, I'm having a brain fart. Hang on. Oh, Janus, that's it. Sorry. It's funny when you start typing something. I didn't have to get to his name, but the name of thing you start typing something and then suddenly the thing pops into your head. Janus, who of course is killed by Paul. But Otheym, Korba, and who did we say there a minute ago? Oh, I said it a minute ago. Goodness gracious me. That's that. All of those characters are in Dune. And so that's the interesting thing. We get to see what's happened to them all. Hang on a second. I did it a second ago. I'll do it again. Sorry, sometimes with me, I keep that much in my head. But when I try to pull something out of it from like yesterday or something like that, or from a wee way back, I have to kind of run with a certain kind of pattern of thought. Because I keep everything in a kind of weird filing cabinet in my head, but it's quicker for me to run through it. Who do we say? Korba, Otheym, Farok. That's the other one. Farok. All three of those characters are in Dune. And I suppose what happens to them all, none of them really seem to have a good end here. And Korba's the really badly corrupted, if you like, Fedaykin. There's nothing more ridiculous as a death commando who's become a priest, something like that Paul says. Quite a true saying, actually. Yeah, so real poverty here, the place being barren, etc. But there's still definitely some care going on here. So Paul nodded to the clear half of Otheym's face and said, "Good luck to you and your dwelling place." It was the greeting of an old friend and siege mate. And Otheym says, "So I see you once more, Usul." The voice speaking his tribal name whined with an old man's quavering. The dull, drooping eye in the side of the face moved about the parchment, skin, and scars. Grey bristles stubbled that side, and the jawline there hung with scabrous peelings. Otheym's mouth twisted as he spoke, the gap exposing silvery metal teeth. I keep wondering about the teeth. Are they just normal kind of silver teeth? Are they Trilaxu teeth or this kind of thing? And Paul says this, "Muad'Dib always answers the call of a Fedaykin," Paul said. The woman in the doorway shadows moved and said, "So Stilgar boasts." Now, this is Dhuri. I was having a wee sort of question about who Dhuri is. And I was wondering, is she Lichna's sister or, I suppose, I don't know how you would put it, like a stepmother, because we know that Lichna's mother is dead. But well, I suppose it's in what we're about to find out. She came, so we're told she came forward into the light, an older version of the Lichna which the face dancer had copied. Paul recalled then that Otheym had married sisters. So what I was wondering is that Dhuri's definitely not Lichna's mother, but probably her aunt, I think, is what I kind of get from that. Not 100% sure. For a moment, I kind of thought she might have been Lichna's sister, but I think that the nature of Frank stating that Otheym had married sisters would make her Lichna's aunt. Excuse me. Her hair was grey, nose grown witch sharp. Weaver's calluses ran along her forefingers and thumbs. A Fremen woman would have displayed such marks proudly in the siege days, but she saw his attention on her hands, hid them under a fold of her pale blue robe. I think that's kind of sad, but it's the fact that he sees them, that she's still. I think the fact that she's hiding them is because that she's still having to be She's still being a weaver, basically, in order to make money. When all these Fremen are millionaires of water. And again, Han's always representing agency in this book, I think. Particularly in this book. She covers it up, I think, is an interesting thing. Paul remembered her name then, Dhuri. The shock was he remembered her as a child, not as she'd. Oh, hang on, sorry, that's my handwriting failing me again. Looks like I've missed a word out. Bear with me a wee second. Not as she'd been. Where are we? Yeah, I've left the word out. Hang on, that's my fault. Not as she'd been. I left out the word been. There we go. The shock. Okay, I'll read that again. Paul remembered her name then, Dhuri. The shock was he remembered her as a child, not as she'd been in his vision of these moments. It was the wine that edged her voice, Paul told himself. She whined even as a child. Now, whined. So we're told that Otheym whined with an old man's quavering. And I suppose that the notable thing about Dhuri for Paul is that she had whined as a child, and that she whines now. Excuse me. Now, the one thing I'm not too sure about here is the shock was he remembered her as a child, not as she'd been in the vision of these moments. So how does he, and she whined even as a child, and I was going, well, how? If she's Otheym's wife, this is 12 years have passed, so the maximum length of time that Paul has known Dhuri would be 15 years, if that makes sense, from his point of arrival on Dune. And if he remembers her as a child, she can't be that old, to be honest with you. Yeah, so that was just I'm not too sure about that. We better work on the word Dhuri. It seems there's quite a lot of etymological stuff on it, but I can tell you that Dhuri is a city in Sangur district in the state of Punjab, India. And we've had a few names in this chapter from the Indian subcontinent, different groups there, but the Banerjee would be another example. And the word Dhuri, this is kind of interesting, and I don't know if I don't really trust my resources on this one, but I can tell you that in Hindi, and I suppose various other variant languages that I think going back to Sanskrit, is that the word Dhuri kind of means like an axis, a hub, a pivot, or a yoke, this kind of thing. However, what I did find out, well, this is the bit that I'm questioning. I don't know if we have any Arabic speakers or not in the audience, but maybe somebody could confirm this at some point. But I've got that it's the Arabic word for nuclear or atomic, I suppose, as an adjective, if you like. So that if that's the case, that's pretty interesting, especially in light of what's going to happen real soon. And I think, yeah, both of those kind of, I suppose, etymological definitions kind of work. But I couldn't get a source on that, by the way. I just found it online, but not for the Arabic. I mean, the rest of it's okay. But there we go. So Paul says, "You see me here," Paul said. "Would I be here if Stilgar hadn't approved?" He turned toward Otheym. "I carry your water burden, Otheym. Command me." This was the straight talk of Sietch brothers. So Sietch brother again. We had old friend and Sietch mate whenever Paul says hello. So Sietch mate, Sietch brothers. Otheym produced a shaky nod. Almost too much for that thin neck. He lifted a liver-marked left hand, pointed to the ruin of his face. Now, here's a problem for us, folks, and I'd love your input on this. If anybody's got your copies of Dune Messiah, I've also checked this on Jakirutu as well. And what I've got here is I caught the splitting disease on Tarahel Usul. So I'll just read that again. I caught the splitting disease on Tarahel Usul. He wheezed right after the victory when we'd all... a fit of coughing stopped his voice. Now, I've got splitting and I've written down spitting ? Because I don't think it's splitting at all. I think it's spitting. In fact, 1 wee second, I'm going to grab another copy of Dune Messiah here just to check this. Hold on, if it was a Dune Messiah, where would that be? Got loads of the damn things. There's one. Oh, there's two right next to each other. So, as I said, we've got a few misprints in this chapter, a few errata, and splitting disease doesn't really make sense to me, especially as much as we've seen the damage to Otheym's face. Maybe it is splitting. Goodness, let's have a wee look. But I think it's spitting. Oh, that's a bit far forward. Let's back up a bit. There we go. Right, sorry, I'm just grabbing a different copy here just to see what it says. But I'm curious if anybody's got spitting, or is it absolutely it is splitting? Because he spits a fair bit. That's kind of where I thought it was possibly a misprint. Where are we? There we go. Yeah, I've got splitting as again. It's just me kind of wondering. Let's try this one. So I've got 3 different copies here. There we go. Yeah, I've got splitting in all 3 of mine. But it's just I could be wrong. I've gone with splitting in my own notes, but I've written spitting ? But then maybe he's pointing to the damage in his face, isn't he? Cynthia saying Paul seems already blind, moving between various memories and his attention to his vision. How much does he really see even before the J-bomb goes off? It's the question I'm always asking. Cynthia, is what does he really see? What does he know? How does he know this? You know, it's and we've got it a few times within this, but thank you very much, folks. Cynthia said my text says splitting. I thought of it as a description of a split face, one side paralyzed, and Chris has got splitting too. I'll go with that. Oh, hang on. Right, little thing. Come on, off my book. Come on. Don't want to kill you. Oh, for God's sake. I've got another one of these wee fruit flies on me. Oh, it's away. There we go. Oh, no, it's not. Go on. Fly off. It's not safe. There we go. Hopefully that should be all right. Yeah, I had a wee fruit fly kind of on my book the other week, and I won't turn the page if there's a wee fly on it. That'll kill it. I'll wait for it to move. But it's one of those things of damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't. And I went in to make myself some coffee and toast after I had done the broadcast. The wee fruit fly landed on my toast and then fell into the toaster. And I was, oh, for goodness sake, I was kind of hoping it wasn't the wee one that I tried not to squish. And then when I came in and put my coffee down, had a few sips and looked back and found another fruit fly dead on it. And it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, that kind of thing. I was a bit miffed about it, but I don't like to kill anything if I can prevent it, if you see what I mean. I don't care how small it is. As my wife doesn't get too happy with me about saving spiders in the house, you know. But yeah, we'll go with splitting. Thank you. It does make sense. Both of them would make sense, but it was because he spits a bit that I was kind of wondering about it. But splitting also makes perfect sense as well. And I was just wondering, is this another misprint? Tara Hell, by the way. Tara in Sanskrit means star. But it's also an old Irish word as well. which comes from, I suppose, Tara is the seat of the High Kings, if you like, in Irish kind of mythological tradition, if you like. If anybody wants to check it out, you'll see. Look it up on Wikipedia. You'll kind of see one of the versions of it. Is it the Stone of Destiny? How would I put it? I don't. Hang on. Let me look it up for you here. Oh, Tara. There's also Buddhism. Tara Hell. That's not the Tara. Hang on. Let's see. That's interesting. The Hill of Tara, sorry, is what you'll have to look it up under. It's not coming up under Tara at all. Goodness, myself and my family holidayed down round that way, and ages back. It's actually when we came home with Holly. That's where we found her down that way. Not quite that far down, but we went to Louth and Douth, and I suppose all the Newgrange stuff. Went and did all the Newgrange stuff. But just about Tara is a hill, an ancient ceremonial burial site near Skirn, County Meath, Ireland. Tradition identifies the hill as the inauguration place and seat of the High Kings of Ireland. It also appears in Irish mythology. Tara consists of numerous monuments and earthworks dating from the Neolithic to the Iron Age, including a passage tomb, which is the mound of the hostages, burial mounds, round enclosures, standing stone, believed to be the Leah Fail, or Stone of Destiny, and a ceremonial avenue. There's also a church and graveyard on the hill, and Tara forms a part of a larger ancient landscape. And Tara itself is a protected national monument under the care of the Office of Public Works and Agency of the Irish Government. I was a little bit gutted whenever we were down there, because it was of all the things that we went to see, Newgrange and the mounds at Louth and Douth, which are Kurgani burial mounds, if you like. The one thing we didn't get to see was Tara, and I was gutted. I really wanted to go and see it. Just to let you know, this is off. So if you want to check it out, it's the Hill of Tara is where you can find it on Wikipedia. And it says the name of Tara is an anglicization of the Irish name Tower, or not Natara. It is also known as Tara Nari, which is Tara of the Kings, and formerly also Leithdrum. Leithdrum, I think that would be. My Irish is non-existent, pretty much. I do my best with pronunciation. Old Irish form is Tamar. It is believed this comes from the Proto-Celtic Temerus and means a sanctuary or sacred space cut off for ceremony, cognate with the Greek temenos and the Latin templum, as it means a view. There you go. That's saved me screen. And of course, so combine that with hell. I suppose hell's a Germanic word. We all know what hell means. Hell's a goddess as well. A bit like Hades, is a person and a place, and is from the old Germanic word to cover or to hide. There's also a suggestion, I suppose, that the biblical hell would come from Sheol. Sorry, Sheol. Learning how to pronounce stuff again very quickly. And let's see, what does it says just with the Wikipedia. Sheol. In the Hebrew Bible is the underworld place of stillness and darkness which lies after death. And if anybody wants to have a wee nosy at that. And the witch of Endor is there. That's quite interesting. All sorts of stuff about the word and how you end up with the word Hades, etc. Worth having a wee nosy at. I had a wee sort of run through it the other day. So you could take it as Tara Hell. It could be like, covered star or something like that. Or just a hell with a view to hell. There's different ways you could interpret that word. I think it's quite interesting. It could just be like star hell, if you like. But anyway, that's right. I caught the splitting disease, and thank you very much for that, folks. On Tara Hell, we'll go with splitting. He wheezed. Right after the victory, when we'd all, and a fit of coughing stopped his voice. And Dhuri said, "The tribe will collect his water soon." She crossed the Otheym, propped pillows behind him, held his shoulder to steady him until the coughing passed. She wasn't really very old, Paul saw, but a look of lost hope ringed her mouth. Bitterness lay in her eyes. Not being very old would kind of line up with Paul remembering her from childhood, that she could have been a child, say, up to a certain age whenever he first met her. So I suppose if you take it up to a point, we could go that she's from X amount to Y amount, possibly of years of age. And she's, I suppose life has aged her. She's got grey hair. If she's not very old. And a look of lost hopes ringed her mouth. Bitterness lay in her eyes. Dhuri is the carer of Otheym, I suppose. Paul says, "I'll summon doctors." Dhuri turned hand on hip. "We've had medical men as good as any you could summon." She sent an involuntary glance to the barren wall on her left. And again, I've just written next to the C epigraph. So they've spent their money on medicine and doctors, etc. There are to be the epigraph. There are to be no balance of payment difficulties between the different spheres of influence. That kind of suggests, medical treatment will bankrupt you. It's something you hear about in America quite a lot. That people being scared to go to hospital, scared to get in an ambulance, this kind of thing, because it's going to cost them money if they don't have health insurance, this kind of thing. I suppose in this country, it's the same actually in the Republic of Ireland, I think, but in Northern Ireland, we're still got the national health system, which is, keeps us all healthy, I suppose, to a degree, but it's under enormous strain. So Paul's thoughts here are, and the medical men were costly. So that's difficulties of payment within spheres of influence, isn't it? That's between the people, the Fremen, and these are Fremen. And you could argue that Otheym's a Fremen in high standing because of his, his buddy days with Paul in the siege. Pardon you, Holly. Oh dear. Holly started taking to give me kind of low kind of things that, hey, what, would you pay attention to me? This kind of thing. Interestingly enough, I suppose these medical men that Paul talks about, they're not going to come. They never came the last time either. The medical men have been involved in Paul's vision a couple of times. We're told that he felt edgy, constrained by the vision, but aware that minor differences had crept in. How could he exploit these differences? How could he exploit the differences? That's an interesting question. Yeah, how could he exploit the differences? That says quite a bit about Paul, doesn't it, I think? Chris is saying hell could also be an abuse of the word hall or holla. I think Herbert did this often. Yeah, playing with language playing with words is what he's all about. It gives me a real hard time, I'll tell you that much, Chris. Thank you very much for that. Pardon me. Pardon you, Holly. Tell you what, folks, excuse me a wee second, would you? What do you need, big one? What's the matter here, huh? Hello? Come on. Oh, you dancing at me? Oh, come here. You want to come in? You going to bark at me now? You're not going to bark, huh? Oh, here, Odie. Come on, see. Oh, he's a good girl. Sorry about this, folks. I need a bit of attention there. This is the dog. Oh, she's dancing. Goodness gracious. Our Holly dances like a Palomino horse. Excuse me. 1 wee second. Come on, nudes. Out we go, ladies. You could come in, but you won't stop barking. Come on, there you go. Go see Wendy. I think you need out. Come on, off you go, nudes. Oh dear, sorry about that. I've been so good to them today. I got them out just before this episode, actually, just to try to wear them out a bit. But for I know what she's after. She wants dental sticks. That's what she's after. Sorry, I shouldn't have shouted that into the microphone. Apologies. That was a holler from my wife. Sorry about that, folks. Oh, she's a big love. We cut our holiday short. Actually, what we were just talking about, going down to all of those places, Tara and Newgrange and all of that stuff. because we found her on the road, on the crossroads. She was about 4 months old and she was starved and badly dehydrated and on the point of death. And we brought her home. We had to cancel it. We had to cut our holiday short. So that's why she's called Holly Holiday. But yeah, there's lots of stuff in Irish mythology to do with dogs and crossroads. So we literally couldn't possibly ignore that without probably bad consequences if you believe in that kind of stuff. But no, she broke our heart. We brought her home and we cut our holiday short. Oh goodness, she was dancing away there. It was very funny. Apologies. Sorry, folks. This is the doghouse. We do have doggies. Occasionally I'll go woof. But oh, they're goodness gracious, they're good fun. Yeah, here we go again. He felt edgy, constrained by the vision, but aware that minor differences had crept in. How could he exploit the differences? How can he use them? And it shows you where kind of his focus is, if you like. And here we go. Time came out of its scheme with subtle changes, but the background fabric held oppressive sameness. He knew with terrifying certainty that if he tried to break out of the enclosing pattern here, it'd become a thing of terrible violence. And just what Cynthia was saying earlier, how much does he really see even before the J-bomb goes off? I've just written down here, how does he know with certainty when there are differences? And he says he knew with terrifying certainty that if he tried to break out of the enclosing pattern here, it'd become a thing of terrible violence. How does he know if there's subtle changes? And the other thing I've also written next to this is his universe is already a place of terrible violence. There's a jihad going on. And we've got a body count, which is in the billions. Doesn't... in 12 years, doesn't that equate to being a universe of terrible violence? Bear with me a second. Just want to check something here. Total 34. One of my little mistakes here. Oh yeah, it's just I've left out a letter there. Time came out of its scheme. Skene's an interesting word. I just double checked its meaning because I've written not geese because a skein of geese is what I would think of. But just so this is for my own benefit, I'll let you guys know as well. So a skein is a length of thread or yarn that's loosely coiled and knotted. But it's also, and this is the one that I didn't know, an element that forms part of a complex or complicated whole. Could be either of those, I think. Time came out of its scheme with subtle changes. But yeah, how does he know for certain? If a thing of terrible violence, how could it possibly be more violent than this? I think it's interesting. The power in this deceptively gentle flow of time oppressed him. It's almost as if time itself, at times it's a bit like a villain, isn't it? What am I thinking on? Something I'm dying to have a look at and make an episode on one day whenever I get time to do this thing. I've said that I would do it. It's on my board, isn't it? I think Sapphire and Steel. If anybody's never seen that, check it out. It's absolutely brilliant. There's very little of it. It's a one-off kind of thing with David McCallum and Joanna Lumley. Time is the enemy. Time is the thing that they're fighting in Sapphire and Steel. Yeah, how would you describe that? It's kind of as if Doctor Who was good and kind of meets the Twilight Zone, something like that. It's kind of like a supernatural science fiction horror, if you like. And I suppose the word we're going to get, one of the words that's associated with Paul in this is oppressed. The power in this deceptively gentle flow of time oppressed him. And this is meant to be a gentle flow of time, I think, what's going on here. I just put Paul oppressed. And I've just written next to this, he's about to sound pissed off a bit, I thought. He says, say what you want of me, he growled. And there's a bit of comeback here from Dhuri. Couldn't it be that Otheym needed a friend to stand by him in this time? Dhuri asked. Does a Fedaykin have to consign his flesh to strangers? And I've just written next to that, ouch, ooh, harsh. And Paul reminded himself, we shared seat. These are his thoughts. We shared seats to bar. She has the right to berate me for apparent callousness. And I kind of wondered about yeah, apparent. It's obvious, I think, is being callous there. Paul's temper getting a bit the better of him. I think he growled. So Paul says, what I can do, I will do. And then Otheym has another fit of coughing, shook Otheym. When it had passed, he gasped, there's treachery, Uso. Fremen plot against you. His mouth worked then without sound. Spittle escaped his lips. That's kind of why I was going with the spitting disease. Dhuri wiped his mouth with a corner of her robe, and Paul saw how her face betrayed anger at such waste of moisture. So Dhuri still very much has the Fremen sensibilities, a bit like the woman who was berating her husband earlier about the new wing of their house leaking dust. And did he think that water fell from heaven? If dust came in, moisture got out. So this is, just the moisture is such, her face betrayed anger. It's such a waste of moisture. That's kind of why I thought it was spitting disease, not as opposed to splitting. But splitting makes perfect sense. Yep. Let me just catch up with your comments, folks, and get a little sip of the precious fluids. This paragraph, Chris says, this paragraph makes me wonder, maybe the Jihad was a better alternative to something far worse, and that could explain Paul's acceptance of it. And Cynthia saying Paul's time would have weaver's calluses as it produces a background fabric, laughing out loud. Very good. Makes me think of the Fates, isn't it? The Morai. Chris, what you're saying, that's I suppose where I've often asked this question. So many of us, by the time we get through the Dune books, we still end up liking Paul as a character. People I think love Paul as a character, not emperor, and the question is why. Especially when we look at what they do and the little details that Frank drops to is the ridiculous body counts of these individuals. He compares himself to Hitler and Genghis Khan, and basically calls them rank amateurs when it comes to the mass slaughter of the human race. It's just statistics, how he kills. But the reason that we don't think of him as a monster, if you like, either of them as monsters, and one is literally a monster, is because of the golden path, which we'll get to. But the idea that if they do anything other than this, it's just much, much worse. It's really, really bad. And of course, we're looking at the Jihad, and that's the thing that we can compare it, whatever Paul is talking about. And ultimately, we'll talk about goodness gracious, the Typhoon struggle whenever we get to that. At the end of time, if you like. How would we put it? There's always that I'm doing this for a good reason. Both of them are seemingly doing this for a good reason, acting as kind of how do we put it? Is it the cruelty of the husbandman towards humankind, if you like? And so, particularly within this chapter, and we've had a run-up of this getting here about Paul, about free will, and does Paul have any at all? Because he seems to be following, as we put it, the script of his memories, if you like. As Cynthia put it, he's moving between various memories and his attention to his vision. And I don't know, the one thing it's the possibility of this. um, how do we put it? That Paul could well be our hero. As much as Herbert's warning is that Paul is a warning about certain types of hero, and in particular, I suppose the patterns and systems that Herbert's used to create Paul, and all the various characters that he's compiled into this one hero. He's meant to be, he's pretty bad, to be honest with you. But if he's doing this for the right reason, that if I do this to save mankind, that's why I'm doing it, and that he gives up his free will and all of this thing, then that actually gives us a justification for liking him and admiring him and seeing him as a hero. And Herbert's going to mess with that as well. And I'm just about to actually get to it in a wee minute. I've made a wee comment about the hero, but it's yeah, that's the thing. If this is the one singular path that can save us all, can you blame him for taking it? And if he does take it and is even prepared to sacrifice his wife and has already sacrificed his child, it's a pretty harsh thing. These are really, what the hell kind of hero is this? Well, that's a good question. Depends on what you think a hero is. And a lot of people take it, I suppose, the idea of a hero is simply the main, you could give it the definition in most people's heads as the main protagonist in a play or film or drama, that kind of thing. But if you look at the classical heroes, the ancient heroes, they're not nice people. None of them are, I think. And well, to be honest with you, the one that we kind of can sympathize with, the only one really, is Oedipus. And Paul, we have an overlay of Oedipus on Paul. I just watched the other night. I just watched Paprika. XZ, who feeds me some stuff, recommended this, and I had seen the film Perfect Blue a long time ago, and I watched Paprika last night, and it was incredible. And I just can't believe that I haven't got around to seeing it tonight. Let me see. It's on Netflix at the minute, folks. Paprika. 2006 Japanese adult animated surrealistic science fantasy psychological thriller film directed by Satoshi Kon, based on the 1993 novel of the same name by Yasutaka Tsutsui. That's hard to say with my new teeth. Kon's fourth and final feature film before his death in 2010. Oh goodness, I love that. Obviously, there's a lot of psychology and that kind of thing in it. But particularly, the character of Paprika flies into a picture of Oedipus and the Sphinx and takes the form of the Sphinx. It's got lots of Oedipal stuff in it. But I loved it. The other thing that I absolutely loved about it was that she takes on the form of Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. Yeah, what a great film. If anybody's not seen it, it'd be something similar to Inception, but not at all. And it kind of got me wondering about Inception. Was it basically, did they really rip this off? Yeah, it's 2010. It's 4 years after. But if anybody's not seen Paprika, what a wonderful film. Check it out. So I just drifted into that. I suppose Oedipus, that was why. And Chris is saying, is the terrible violence immediate or something more global, unraveling everything going forward? And I get the sense that whatever it is, there's terrible violence going on right now in this universe and has been for 12 years, with billions and billions of people dead. Generally, it's goodness gracious. What am I thinking on? The gist of it, I think we'll get there really in the next book, is Chris, is it's Kralazek. What's called the typhoon struggle. This is it'll be, and again, we're fed little bits of this, as if you like, as we go. And it's kind of meant to be a kind of end of I don't know if it really. We're going to talk about this in a wee minute. I suppose, as I said, we're going to. Let me see. Spinning. Oh, I've moved backwards here. Ultimately it's Kralazek. So the point is it's a far, far future. And I was saying that we're going to have a wee chat about Frank Herbert and I'm going to give you some quotes from Frank when we get down a little bit here on the Golden Path. And we're going to give you his exact definition of what it is. And the paradoxical nature of it's the problem with time, I suppose, that so I'm going to hang on to it for a little bit, Chris, because there's some more things some more things that happen within this that I'd like to get through before I bring that in, so it makes a bit more sense, if you like. Excuse me. As I said, it's something really to do with the God Emperor Jin, but it's relevant here. So we have Dhuri's, I suppose, her face betraying the anger at such a waste of moisture. Paul's kind of anger spelling through. And we're told that his frustrated rage threatened to overwhelm Paul then. And his thoughts are here that Otheym should be spent thus. A Fedaykin deserved better. I've got a misprint here, an extra letter added to Otheym's name. In my book, it's got Otheymn, Otheym, should be spent thus. Exclamation mark. A lot of exclamation marks in this chapter, as usual. Frustration, rage, anger's probably whenever we first meet Paul, it's all about caution and stuff like that, isn't it? But anger is his dominant emotional trait, I think. And this is rage. That Otheym should be spent thus. A Fedaykin deserved better. And here we go. But no choice remained. Not for a death commando or his emperor. They walked Occam's razor in this room. The slightest misstep multiplied horrors, not just for themselves, but for all humankind, even for those who would destroy them. And there we go. Oh no, don't be worrying about that, Chris. It's just it's something I've brought in. Chris is saying, yeah, I don't want to derail. Sorry, don't apologize, Chris, not at all. It's something that I've brought in for this chapter. And I could have brought it in a little bit, but I've actually got it a wee bit down the way. I'm trying to figure out where it is here. Not too far away, actually, just a couple of pages. But it's just particularly to do with time and stuff like that, and the nature of choice. But we're told here that no choice remained. I don't agree with that. I think there are always choices. They walked Occam's razor in this room. The slightest misstep multiplied horrors. Now, that's kind of, I'm wondering what that's about. So let's have a wee chat about Occam's razor briefly. The one that most people go with is that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. That's the general interpretation of Occam's razor. I'll give you a little bit of info on it. In Latin, it's Navoculi Occami, and Occam's razor is often spelt wrong. So it comes from William of Occam, Occam's village in Surrey. I got my first degree from the University of Surrey. And his dates, so William of Occam, Ockham, is where we get Occam's razor from. He's born around 1287, and I've got two dates for his death. They're either the 9th or the 10th of April, 1347. So I'll give you the wee blurb here. Occam is a village in Surrey. He was a Franciscan friar, philosopher, and apologist. And I've got some spurious stuff here about him. He's supposed to be an influence on Chaucer, Molinet, Rabelais, the Gawain poet, who we like, and others. Well, I like Chaucer and I like Rabelais too. I've written down that this is spurious. He's also an advocate for the separation of church and state. And so what we have is, here we go, entia non sunt multiplicanda praeter necessitatem. If I'll do that again, entia non sunt multiplicanda praeter necessitatem. That's a tricky one. Translation from the Latin is entities must not be multiplied beyond necessity. Now, just to let you know that that is not in any of William of Ockham's surviving works, though it is attributed to him. Now, I'll give you Bertrand Russell's version of it from A History of Western Philosophy. This is his interpretation of what you've just heard. And it's, if one can explain a phenomenon without assuming this or that hypothetical entity, there is no ground for assuming it. Look for an explanation in terms of the fewest possible causes, factors, or variables. So that seems to kind of suit a little bit more what Frank's talking about here. That they walked Occam's razor in this room. The slightest misstep multiplied horrors. So entities must not be multiplied beyond necessity is kind of the way I would take that meaning of it, as opposed to the common interpretation of Occam's razor, if that makes sense. I think that's the one that Frank's really meaning here. And of course, we can take that, the fact that the razor, we can consider that as a bit like the old Blade Runner, running a fine line, if you like, walking on an edge, if you like. But just interesting little drop of that scientific principle in. But yeah, check out William of Ockham if anybody's interested. But yeah, I've just written that there are always choices, I think. It's a bit like what we said, if you run out of questions, you're in trouble. But you can always make a choice. And no choice remained, but he has made a choice. He's sticking to this. The other thing I kind of keep talking about that within relation to this, that I think that this often reminds me on, is, oh goodness, is the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. Oh, bear with me a wee second. Let's grab it. Tom, stop. Where are you? There you go. Just notice the cover there. There we go. Sorry, there you are. Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. If anybody's not familiar with this, it's a great play. I absolutely love it. I've taught this play. And it's basically set up as a play within Hamlet, if you like. There's a really good film of it, which I haven't seen. It must be quite old now, and it's Gary Oldman and, oh goodness, Tim Roth, I believe. Let me see. 1990 film, there we go, based on, God, they're young in that, aren't they? Let's see, who directed? Oh yeah, so the film's directed by Tom Stoppard himself, based on his 1966 play of the same name. So it's been around a good time. And just says here that the film depicts two minor characters from William Shakespeare's play Hamlet, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Sorry, I'll read that again. Depicts two minor characters from William Shakespeare's play Hamlet, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who find themselves on the road to Elsinore Castle at the behest of the King of Denmark. It's a really good film. Let's see, who else is in it? Oh, Richard Dreyfuss as the leading player. Ian Glenn as Hamlet. Ian Richardson as Polonius. Joanna Miles as Gertrude, and Donald Sumter as King Claudius. It was Stoppard's first and to date only film as a director. I think it's great. Really good. Check it out if you've not seen it. If you're a fan of Hamlet, all the action kind of takes place in between, if you like. And these are of course Hamlet's two buddies from university, aren't they? Who come along and kind of end up using him and manipulating him. The great thing about it is that there's this constant tossing of a coin, if you like, within the play. I think it's brilliant. It's a really, really good a really good play. I think it's better than Hamlet. But of course, the whole point is that the coin always comes up the same way. And the really interesting thing about this is ultimately the kind of discussion between the characters that they realize that everything's determined for them because of this coin, that they have no free will, and ultimately that they must be characters in a play. And it's absolutely brilliant. In terms of free will, that kind of thing, I think it's very relevant to this kind of stuff, if you know what I mean. Worth having a look at. And you've got two really good actors, excuse me, in those roles, Goodness, 1990. It's a long time ago now, 34 years ago. But yeah, Tim Roth and Gary Oldman. And yeah, haven't seen it in ages. I'd love to watch it again. So that's kind of what it reminds me on. But anyway, that was that little bit about Frank's use of Occam's razor here. We're told that Paul squeezed calmness into his mind and looked at Dhuri. The expression of terrible longing with which she gazed at Otheym strengthened Paul. I think it's quite sad. And Paul's thoughts here are, Chani must never look at me that way, he told himself. With an expression of terrible longing. But it strengthens him. And I like that. He squeezed calmness. He's gone from frustrated rage to squeezing calmness into his mind. He looked at Dhuri. The expression of terrible longing with which he gazed at Otheym strengthened Paul. It's probably an expression of love and loss, isn't it? It's another. She's quite a tragic character, Dhuri, I think, but at the same time a very strong character and one to be admired, I think. Takes a lot to do what she's doing, I think, But Paul's thoughts were, Chani must never look at me that way. Paul says, Lichna spoke of a message. And Otheym says, my dwarf, Otheym wheezed. I bought him on a world I forget. He's a human distrans, a toy discarded by the Tlilaxu. He's recorded all the names, the traitors. And Otheym fell silent, trembling. And I've made a wee note here that Bijaz is a slave, a toy, and ultimately, I suppose in this case, a totally pointless recorder. Because somebody I've written down, notebook and pen would do the same job. Especially when we'll get down a little bit, we'll realize that where Otheym's been, and that Dhuri's probably been with him, that there's no reason why they just can't come down and scribble all these names down. I think, it's a bit bizarre. He's recorded all the names of the traitors. So Dhuri says, You speak of Lichna, Dhuri said. When you arrived, we knew she'd reached you safely. If you're thinking of this new burden Otheym places upon you, Lichna is the sum of that burden. An even exchange, Usul. Take the dwarf and go. And of course, there's a level of dramatic irony there, isn't there, really? We all know that Lichna's dead. And that the fact that Paul has turned up leaves Dhuri to make an assumption that she knew that she'd reach you safely, and it's not the case at all. And that there's a level of tragedy with this family that's quite it's quite heavy. I think a lot for us as a reader. There's a fair bit of dramatic irony there. Paul suppressed a shudder, closed his eyes. Lichna, the real daughter, had perished in the desert, a Samuta-racked body abandoned to the sand and wind. And I've made a wee note, by the way, that her water, therefore, does not get taken for the tribe, if you like, or by the tribe. And Paul, opening his eyes, Paul said, you could have come to me at any time for... and Dhuri replies, Otheym stayed away that he might be numbered amongst those who hate you, Usul. The house to the south of us, at the end of the street, that is a gathering place for your foes. It's why we took this hovel. Now, just before we move on with that, just Lichna is the sum of that burden, and even exchangers will take the dwarf and go. He doesn't tell her Lichna is dead, and so he changed. You could have come to me at any time for. He's kind of almost offering an excuse here, isn't he? But what he's done is provide a lie of omission, which he seems to be quite good at. He just doesn't say that. You could say that maybe they're sparing. He's sparing them this, but it's probably more to do with the fact that he hasn't seen himself do that. Most likely, he avoids telling them this, and we'll see a little bit about his guilt, etc. And again, this kind of discussion of free will. But that's what Dhuri has said, that we haven't come near you, basically, so we can pretend to be amongst those that hate you. And we're told the house to the south of us at the end of the street, that's where they all are. And there's a gathering place for your foes. It's why we took this hovel. So again, the Fremen of Suburbia, if you like. It's one of those, it reminds me on, I don't know if anybody's ever seen the Akira Kurosawa film, Sanjuro, which is one of my favorite films. It's such a funny film, such a poignant film, very well realized. It's where you'll get the discussion about the brightest swords stay in their scabbard. I absolutely adore that movie. It kind of reminds me on that, because the idea is that these young idiots, these young samurai, have managed to get the head of their household kind of kidnapped and by some corrupt officials, and the whole kind of thing. Sanjuro is the same samurai from Yojimbo, played by Toshiro Mifune, and he kind of agrees to help them. He's a Ronin. And of course, the really stupid thing is that they're trying to find this guy. Where's he been? Where are they holding him? All this stuff, and the whole time they're right next door. If you see what I mean, that kind of reminded me on Sanjuro that they're all sitting right next door. And eventually they look over the fence, and it's a wonderful comedy. It's a samurai comedy, and I absolutely love it. It's possibly my favorite Akira Kurosawa film. It makes me laugh so much. It's a really good film. It's got the nuttiest sword fight at the end ever. It's just one of them. It's like a Wild West gunfight, and it's just these two samurais. But the amount of blood in it is ridiculous. Well, it's not blood; it's chocolate. It's black and white film. But the story about what happened, it's really good. But if anybody's not seen it, and you like it, you love a good film, regardless of what type of film it is, check out Sanjuro. He's meant to be. He calls himself Sanjuro 30, and I think is it the old woman. The old woman in the film's hilarious, and I think she goes like more like Sanjuro 40. It's a wonderful film. It's the characters and the acting, and it's brilliant, But that kind of reminded me on this. All the bad guys are just down the road. They're just next door. And there's something about this chapter as well. I think it's we talked about the Fremen of Suburbia, and I kind of imagine all of these other Fremen conspirators and something a bit like Abigail's party down the road, if you know what I mean. Keeping up with the Fremen. So Paul says then summon the dwarf and we'll leave. And Dhuri, again, you've not listened well, Dhuri said. And it's explained to him. Otheym says this: you must take the dwarf to a safe place, Otheym said, an odd strength in his voice. He carries the only record of the traitors. No one suspects his talent. They think I keep him for amusement. Dhuri says, we cannot leave. Going back to what Paul said, then summon the dwarf and we'll leave. We cannot leave. Only you and the dwarf. It's known how poor we are. We've said we're selling the dwarf. They'll take you for the buyer. It's your only chance. Paul, we're told, consulted his memory of the vision in it. He'd left here with names of the traitors, but never seeing how those names were carried. The dwarf obviously moved under the protection of another oracle. It occurred to Paul then that all creatures must carry some kind of destiny, stamped out by purposes of varying strengths by the fixation of training and disposition. From the moment the Jihad, what you were asking about, Chris, a wee while back, here we go. From the moment the Jihad had chosen him, he'd felt himself hemmed in by the forces of a multitude. Excuse me. So it's the way he looks at it. It's not that he chose the Jihad, it's the Jihad chose him. And these things have always been personified in this chapter. The Jihad being one, time being another. From the moment the Jihad had chosen him, he'd felt himself hemmed in by the forces of a multitude. Their fixed purposes demanded and controlled his course. So the multitude, this is his people, I suppose, all the people of the Imperium, anybody involved in the Jihad. Their fixed purposes demanded and controlled his course. And here we go. Any delusions of free will he harbored now must be merely the prisoner rattling the cage. His curse lay in the fact that he saw the cage. He saw it. That's just another one I was wondering about. I've got a question mark there in my chapter. And I was wondering, is that correct? Could anybody maybe just tell me, have you got question marks there? That's part number 40. Let's see on my thing. I've got his curse lay in the fact that he saw, is emphasized, the cage, full stop. And then we've got he saw, again emphasized, it, and I have a question mark. I was kind of wondering, is that a question? Or is it a misprint? Again, just curious. I was thinking it might have been better with an exclamation mark as a form of emphasis. It could just as well be a question. He saw it, but it doesn't quite make sense to me. I have an exclamation point. It's not a question. It doesn't have a word indicating a question, does it? Thank you very much, Cynthia. I didn't think it. Yeah. Oops. He saw it. Yeah. It's the exclamation mark of it. It is. It's not a question at all, is it? Honest to goodness. Really does change things, doesn't it? If it's a question, is he doubting? Does he even see it? Thank you. I'll read that again. Thanks so much. His curse lay in the fact that he saw the cage. He saw it. There you go. Proper Kyle MacLachlan, Paul Atreides there. Thank you. It's not a question. It was. If you don't mind, folks, I'm just going to put that into the text here. Where are we? Got note number 45. Is it? Yeah, 45. Yeah, there it is. It's an exclamation mark. Not bad at sussing these things out, but it's nice to get confirmation from you folks. Thank you very much, Cynthia. Exclamation point. It kind of did make sense. I said I've got 3 copies here, but 2 of them are actually from the same publisher. Aren't they pretty much? Yeah, that's the kind of their nail books. Any New English publisher. Is that it? New English Library, sorry. That's probably my favorite cover for Dune Messiah, by the way. I quite like that one. It's a bit worn, isn't it? Pleased to say it hasn't. Yeah, I've used this one to work on, but it hasn't fallen apart. My new copy of Dune Messiah, folks, is another one that we may ask the question: will it survive this? It's not looking good at the minute, I have to say. Chris is asking, what is the multitude? Did Paul have memories like Reverend Mother's? I can't remember. Well, according to, Paul should have, the point of the Kwisatz Haderach, I think, is that he has all the other memory. He has other memory and of him. Supposedly the Kwisatz Haderach is meant to open up the male line of other memory, I believe. Excuse me. I think he has the other memory of the female line too. I'm not 100% sure on that, but the other problem, I suppose, is the Kwisatz Haderach comes with, excuse me, um, how would I put it? It's the prescience, if you like. And so, as much as they're meant to be able to look back and take still on these things, ultimately, the problem for them is that they have ability to look forward. And I suppose other memory being a sort of a collective unconscious, if you like, for the Bene Gesserit is the female only line. And there's problems with how it's described in the book, but I think it's not all women throughout history. I think certain individuals are preserved, if you like, and probably the goal is to get as many of them as possible. To not have the male line preserved is a big problem, I think, and I think that's why the Bene Gesserit went down that route. But he's also, the Bene Gesserit, I suppose the Kwisatz Haderach, the base template for it, I think, from the Bene Gesserit's point of view, is start with a mentat, and mix things up, add a pinch of this, that kind of thing. It's almost like there's a recipe for it. But ultimately, and it becomes the same for Alia, I think, that they both seem to be looking forward all the time rather than looking forward and backward. Other memory, I suppose, the male and the female, both. And we get to the God Emperor. How do you control the multitude? You're saying the multitude there. I get your meaning. Let me just have another wee look at it, because we're running. Is that the multitude from other memory? From the moment the Jihad had chosen him, he'd felt himself hemmed in by the forces of a multitude. Their fixed purposes demanded and controlled his course. It's quite possible. I don't know what anybody else thinks. It could be that multitude from other memory demanding, as he said, because it often seems to be demanding, doesn't it? That he goes down one particular course. And I think we get examples of the multitude kind of going, oh no, every now and then. I think that's possibly within the Bene Gesserit, I recall. Is it possibly with Jessica? At the point of taking the water of life, I think, if I can remember correctly. But that's a good point. It could be both. That's a really good point. I'm just going to make a wee note about that, Chris. I actually hadn't thought about that myself. It could well be. Is this the multitude from other memory? Let's scribble that in. It's a very good question. Other memory. Or is it the multitude of just, the universe, all the beings, all the different groups? Question mark. Good question. I have to highlight that. There you go. Give it a different color. That's a good question. I don't know is the answer. Chris is saying I've wondered about that because it's not talked as much about with Paul. Yeah, the focus really does go on to the future, doesn't it? With the Atreides scions, if you like. Yeah, I suppose we don't really get too much of I suppose with the God Emperor. I suppose there's some discussions about different personalities. The one that he brings to the fore to control the multitude, from the demanding multitude of other memory is Harem, the Egyptian pharaoh, sort of a God Emperor himself, if you like. Me neither, says Chris, laughing out loud. Well, I've got to be honest about it, Chris. There's no point in bullshitting. I don't know. It's it's a bloody good point. It's something I hadn't considered. It when I read it as multitude, I took it as all the people in the universe, all the different groups. The Fremen, the Guild, the Bene Gesserit, the Tleilaxu, the major and minor houses, all of them, and everybody. That's the way I took it. by the forces of a multitude, but it could really be. The other thing is his future memories are part. His future visions are now that he's had are now a memory, and that there is something paradoxical about this, isn't there? Um, it's enough to it's not you have to kind of question it. You understand kind of now why how would we put it that abominations go nuts, if you see what I mean. It's if you did have all of this, it's a really good point, and it's a subtle thing, that word, isn't it, multitude. Rather than going into detail about the moment that Jihad had chosen him, he felt himself hemmed in by the forces of a multitude. Is this multitude then from other memory, or is it the groups in the universe? It's a good question. Their fixed purposes demanded and controlled his course. That would maybe suggest more the different groups, but again, this is the other thing with other memory, is that surely within other memory are, if we take it as a male and female memory, or just male, it doesn't really matter, but surely there would be people within that from different factions, different groups, different representatives of humanity, if you like, different schools of thought, and ancient individuals as well. I often wonder why there's no Agamemnon going, let's go to this kind of thing. If that's his, or even a Pelops or anything like that. Why these ancient ancestors that the House of Atreides supposedly, claims descent from, which is highly unlikely, as they're really into slaughtering themselves, aren't they? But that's a good one, Chris. Thank you very much. It's worth considering. I don't have an answer for you. It could be either. It's particularly because the words demanding and this kind of thing. How we see all the different sort of aspects of other memory, all the different personalities coming to the fore. That's kind of what they're like. It's a similar kind of language, isn't it? So thank you very much. Here we go, the free will thing. Any delusions of free will he harbored now must be merely the prisoner rattling his cage. His curse lay in the fact that he saw the cage. He saw it. Makes much more sense. He saw it. I can see it. Not a question. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. He listened now to the emptiness of the house, only the four of them in it. Dhuri, Otheym, the dwarf, and himself. If we think about those, the way Frank writes his books, what he's told us how he writes them, using Jungian mandalas, pairing opposites, this kind of thing. We've got Dhuri and Otheym representing the Fremen. We have the dwarf, if you like, and Paul, Bijaz and Paul being two sort of possible sides of the prescience. That's how I would line them up in that. Dhuri and Otheym being opposites, male, female, of the Fremen, straight talking, the old ways, if you like, and then the dwarf, Bijaz and Paul, the two prescient individuals in the room, would make an interesting, little mandala, and often how he talks about putting in sort of the different shadings of emotion and character within that. So he inhaled the fear and tension of his companions, sensed the watchers, his own forces hovering in thopters overhead, and those others next door. And Paul's thoughts are, I was wrong to hope, Paul thought, but thinking of hope brought him a twisted sense of hope. Paradoxical, isn't it? And he felt that he might yet seize his moment. Summon the dwarf, he said. And Bijaz, Dhuri called. Bijaz says, you call me? The dwarf stepped into the room from the courtyard, an alert expression of worry on his face. Generally the expressions of, if he's not being a little bit gloating, if you like, that kind of thing, expressions on his face aren't quite, ones that would instill confidence in anybody. Let me just see when we first meet him. No awe in his manner, merely the gloating of a slow smile. things are a wee bit. He's not really well. I might be gloating a little bit, but he's got worry on his face. This will kind of increase the level of anxiety, if you like, that Bijaz has as we move along. An alert expression of worry on his face. Dhuri, you have a new master, Bijaz, Dhuri said. She stared at Paul. You may call him Usul. Usul, that's the base of the pillar, Bijaz said, translating. How can Usul be base when I'm the basest thing living? He always speaks thus, Otheym apologized. Bijaz says this, I don't speak. I operate a machine called language. It creaks and groans, but is mine own. And Paul's thoughts here are a Tailaxu toy, learned and alert. The Bene Chilax never threw away something this valuable. He turned, studied the dwarf, round melange eyes returned his stare. What other talents have you, Bijaz? Paul asked. And this is what Bijaz says. I know when we should leave, Bijaz said. It's a talent few men have. There's a time for endings, and that's a good beginning. Let us begin to go, Usul. And Paul examined his own vision memory. No dwarf, but the little man's words fitted the occasion. And Paul says this, and this is where I've got my little notes, so I'll just cut to that in a second. At the door, you called me sire, Paul said. You know me then. And I'll just cut back to this. You've sired, sire, Bijaz said, grinning. You are much more than the base Usul. You're the Atreides emperor, Paul Muad'Dib, and you are my finger. Now, we'll get to that in a minute, but time to jump back. And before I do this, folks, I'm going to run to the loo very quickly, and I'll be right back. Apologies. Bear with me a second. Thank you. This is kind of a bit where I'd shoot in this note, and it was to do with the problem of time. Now, let me see. Let me just quickly tell you where I got this from. Bear with me a wee second. Just give me the right. It's basically from, excuse me, Frank Herbert's audio tapes. Just I check that I got the. I'll give you the right one. Science Fiction Station, Dune Audio. No, archive addresses. Now I was listening to parts 15 and 16 there. So this is to do with the Frank Herbert archive, if you like. There's a couple of places that you can get this stuff. I've put a full list of it within the community section of the Science Fiction Station here on YouTube. So the one that I was listening to was June. It's part 19. I just listened to 15. So the ones that are, it says parts 1 to 4, 15 to 16, and 19 are interviews and conversations with Frank Herbert. So I think these are the ones that I'm pretty sure he's nattering away to Professor Willis E. McNally, who's the compiler of the Dune Encyclopedia, which kind of Brian Herbert has tried to kind of say is not canon, etc. Now, there it is. which I thought was a really low move, actually. Cynthia saying, Bijaz sounds like an Elizabethan jester with cutting puns on plays on words. Yeah, I was going to have a wee chat about that. He's very much like that kind of thing. I was thinking on King Lear's Fool, this kind of character. Before we go any further, Bijaz then. Not exact, but Bija within Sanskrit means seed. You could take it if you want Bai and Jaz being two different words, Bai meaning two. Jaz would be Proto-Slavic for abyss or gap, and is Slovene for an individual or ego. But I think it's probably from the Sanskrit. He's a seed, which makes a bit of sense, I think, to me. And I'm pretty sure, I think Paul has been described that way before, possibly even hate. I'll have to check that out. Don't take my word for it. I'm trying to sort of stoke the old memory. I'm sure I'm certain a prescient characters, probably Paul, has been described as a seed before. So just in relation to time, the golden path, what's going on, is Paul stuck, etc., etc. This is from the Frank Herbert Audio Archive, tape number 19, and it was just to do with the golden path, and we often talk about it. He has given a very precise definition, well, two of them, to be honest. But when basically what he said is, if you want to know what the definition of the golden path is, he says that the gate is open. And he doesn't really want you to dilute that phrase, but I'll come to that in a wee second. It's to do with the problem with time and the consequences to human survival. And basically, it's to do with, and this is what the golden path's all about. X said he was looking forward to having this read out on the channel, but it's basically that Herbert's idea of whenever we have someone like Paul seeing a future up to a certain point, regardless of how long that is, and even if it's something like billions of years, that it's I think his own words, a blip compared to infinity. Basically, you take it as any period of time, if you like, versus infinity will be just a blip compared to the infinite nature of infinity, which is, one of those things. So it's just the way that he was describing that, and that this is where the paradox comes from, I suppose, with the prescience, is that there's a finite nature to it, if you like, ultimately. And I'll try to scribble this down. There's a little dip in volume, but I think I've got it right. That's what Frank is saying about the gate is open. In other words, whenever you close things off and start, that's the problem. But he says it's a kind of paradox. Paradox is a hand, and you'll get why I'm saying this, a finger pointing at something beyond it. The paradox of infinity. And you extend your time sense and leave it open. In other words, the paradox of infinity is that you need to extend your time sense and leave it open-ended. And therefore, the golden path, according to Frank Herbert, he used two phrases. The gate is open is the way he says, and if you add it, but what he means is that the golden path is the open-ended time sense. And I just thought as much that was worth bringing in. That's Frank discussing things at the point of having written God Emperor, and it's to do with stuff to go into the to the Dune Encyclopedia. But that's, I think, therefore now we get the nature of the problem of the Atreides, that as this isn't an infinite path, that it's Paul's time sense isn't open-ended, if that makes sense. It's incredibly restricted. And the consequences to human survival, if you like, is whenever we start to close things off, if you like. When we close the gate, if you want. That this is what creates the crux of the problem. This is the paradox of the golden path, if you like. And how far down the road can an Atreides see? And regardless of how far it is, Herbert's assuming actually that the universe is infinite. And who's to say it is? So there we go. Bijaz, yeah, it sounds like an Elizabethan jester with cutting puns and plays on words. I've got a couple of wee things that I thought he was a bit like. Let me see. Yeah, that's where we're at. That's why I'm reading that. I've written at the top of the page here a couple of things. Before I turn the page, actually, here, Bijaz, I have considered a couple of things, but I've actually written at the end of the chapter that we end with a Shakespearean rhyming couplet, the way Shakespeare would end a scene. From Bijaz, he's very Shakespearean, I think. And I've considered him in the light of a couple of things. First of all, if we consider Paul Oedipus, then we can think of the Sphinx as, Bijaz as the Sphinx, because Bijaz speaks in riddles, just like the Sphinx. The other thing that I considered him along with was Caliban. From Shakespeare's The Tempest. Bear with me a wee second. If I could, I wish I'd figured out what I did with my Robert Graves, because I could do with it on the table right now. The Sphinx in the Oedipus story is a monster that ravages. It's from the area Boeotia, basically. Sphinxes or sphinges? Let's see. So Sphinx is a creature with the head of a human, the body of a lion, and the wings of an eagle. The one that's often represented in the Oedipus myth is a gynosphinx, a female sphinx. The one that you know at the Great Pyramid is an androsphinx, or a male sphinx. And people often mix the two up. One's in Egypt, one's in Greece, and one's got nothing to do with the other. So just to say, in the Greek tradition, the Sphinx is a treacherous and merciless being with the head of a woman, the haunches of a lion, and the wings of a bird. According to Greek myth, she challenges those who encounter her to answer a riddle and kills and eats them when they fail to solve the riddle. This deadly version of a Sphinx appears in the myth and drama of Oedipus. So there we go. You get riddle games and stuff like that in all sorts of stories. Yeah, the word Sphinx, it says here on, this is Wikipedia, is associated by folk etymology with the verb sphingo, meaning to squeeze or to tighten up. The name may be derived from the fact that lions kill their prey by strangulation, biting the throat of prey and holding them down until they die. However, the historian Susan Wise Bauer suggests that the word Sphinx was instead a Greek corruption of the Egyptian name Sheshepang, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which means living image, and referred rather to the statue of the Sphinx, which was carved out of living rock that was a contiguous part of the stony body of the Earth's shape, but not cut away from its earlier source. That's not really quite. I was looking for. I don't know. The Sphinx is. I was talking about paprika. Where paprika dives into the picture of Oedipus and the Sphinx. It's one of the ones that I've used in the videos. I'll just have a wee look to see if I can see it there. It's probably there it is. It's the one it's the Gustave Moreau painting, which I saw on Paprika the other day. It was excellent. There's a lot of wonderful art around Sphinxes and Oedipus, etc. But I was kind of looking for more of its lineage, etc. there, but we'll probably find that somewhere else, like in Robert Graves. Probably a creature of nightmares, this kind of thing. But there we go. So I was thinking about him as Sphinx. I was also thinking about him in terms of Caliban, Cynthia, as well, and in King Lear's Fool. So as you say, Elizabethan jester. And fools are often wise. I can attest to that. But it was, where are we? It's especially when he says, Usul, that's the base of the pillar. How could Usul be base when I'm the basest thing living? And it's, I suppose, And then I don't speak, I operate a machine called language. It creaks and groans, but is mine own. What is it, the thing that Caliban says in The Tempest? Is it, you taught me language, and my only profit on it is I know how to curse. He's meant to be the basest thing, if you like. He's not a, bestial. Um, and he even attempts to rape Miranda, I believe, in the play. But he's his language and his eloquence and all of this kind of stuff, from the basest of creatures, is kind of paradoxical. And I don't speak. I operate a machine called language. It creaks and groans, but is mine own. What is Bijaz, I suppose, is the question. And before I get over the page, I suppose, I know when we should leave. He says it's a talent few men have. There's a time for endings, and that's a good beginning. Let us begin to go. So the question I wrote, and it's oddly enough, I was quite pleased with myself, but I write these notes as I go, was, does Bijaz hide his own prescience? Sorry, does Bijaz hide his prescience by his own oracular ability? And then the next question I wrote about him was, is Bijaz a Kwisatz Haderach? So just catching up before I jumped off of the golden path. Paul says, at the door you called me sire. Paul said, you know me then. You've sired, sire. Bijaz said, you've had kids. There's kind of a double meaning there. Grinning, you are much more than the base Uso. You're the Atreides emperor, Paul Muad'Dib, and you are my finger. And that's why I've given you that little bit of stuff on the golden path here. Just to read you that again, a kind of paradox. This is in relation to any period of time versus infinity. This is Frank Herbert's words. A kind of paradox. The gate is open. It's a kind of paradox. Paradox is a hand, a finger, pointing at something beyond it. And that's where and I said I'm hoping to do maybe some notes on those tapes at some point. I've listened to some of them before, a long time ago, but not most of them. So I'm kind of curious. It'd be worth going through and scribbling some notes, I think. But we thought we'd pull that one out. The paradox of infinity is what the golden path is all about. It's all to do with the problem with time. And the golden path is the open-ended time sense, quote unquote, from Frank. And the best way he said to describe the golden path is, quote unquote, the gate is open. And he actually says you shouldn't add more words to that because it just messes with it. So he held up you're the Atreides emperor, Paul Muad'Dib, and you're my finger. He held up the index finger on his right hand, and Dhuri says, Bijaz, you tempt fate. I've done a few wee drawings with his finger in his hand here. I've written next to this from the Latin indicatus, to point, if you like. And then I've written, for some reason, see wiki. Hang on. So let's have a look. Probably a whole pile of stuff. See Wikipedia on index finger, but it was to do with it's probably, there you go, index finger, also referred to as the forefinger, first finger, second finger, pointer finger, trigger finger, digitus secundus, digitus 2, many other terms. But to indicate the point, just to scroll around. Now, there is no it just says, first of all, in some cultures, particularly the Malays and Javanese in Southeast Asia, pointing using the index finger is considered rude. Hence, the thumb is used instead. That's interesting. Now, what I've got here, have no citation for, but I'll read it anyway. This is on the index finger in Wikipedia, and it says the index finger in Islam. It says, in Islam, raising the index finger signifies the tawhid, which denotes the indivisible oneness of God. It is used to express the unity of God, and there is no God but God. And citation needed. So I don't know if that's true or not. It also says then, there's a couple of citations for this. In Arabic, the index or forefinger is called musabiha, probably mispronouncing that, mostly used with the definite article, al-musabiha, sometimes also al-sabaha is used. The Arabic verb, which shares the same root as the Arabic word for index finger, means to praise or glorify God by saying Subhana Allah. And it also says below this, before the advent of GPS and compass, early humans used index finger for pointing direction of objects with the help of stellar objects during the night time. Okay. And then just below, if you have a look, you'll get the index finger in some depictions of art. There's Plato in the School of Athens by Raphael doing that. And let's have a wee look. I thought that was kind of interesting. The index finger pointing up is a sign of teaching authority. There you go. And as an example of that, of Plato in the School of Athens by Raphael. So some interesting stuff there, I thought. It's kind of interesting. Now, Chris is saying, I think Bijaz may be showing his Zen Sunni roots as well. The wordplay feels like Zen koans, especially the finger pointing out the paradox of subject and object. Very good, Chris. I had one other thought on it, but I'm going to go with it now. Hang on, I might be wrong about this. Bear with me a second. My old memory is not 100% today, but I don't think that the Trilaxia is Zen Sunni. And in fact, they're Zen Sufi, which gives it a slightly different meaning, I suppose. Let me see if I can just confirm that. What book do we confirm it in? It's, bear with me. Grab the digital copies of Dune just to check this. I say this quite a lot, but it's Zen Sunni and Zen Sufi. I tend to get them mixed up, but I'm pretty sure that's the big mystery about. Where are we? Bear with me a second. Where on earth? There we go. I might be wrong. Might have the wrong book actually here. What are we on? June 5. This is to do with Waf. Waf held his silence. He could believe that all of them were reflecting on their Sufi origins, recalling the great belief in the Zen Sunni ecumenism that had spawned the Beni Trilaks. People of this Kel knew that the God-given facts of their origins, generations of a secrecy, assured that no Powinda shared this knowledge. Let me just check. Knowing this can't recall the calendar. Waf reminded them of the Zen Sunni admonition. Bear with me. Or maybe I'm completely. What is the Sufi Zen Sunni credo? Maybe I'm wrong. I can't remember. It's long. Zen Sunni Mazri. A lot of Zen Sunni stuff. I might be completely wrong. Hang on. Is Waf a secret Zen Sunni? Yeah. They're not just, okay, they're not just, this is the kind of mystery. The gift of surprise is the greatest gift of all. Waf said, not just Zen Sunni to Zarazal, Sufi also. Sufi. She began to readjust her perspective on the Tulaxi, How long have they been holding this close to their breasts? That's the kind of moment the Bene Gesserit figure it out. Let me see. That did not argue with either Sufi or Zen Sunni beliefs. And sorry, I'm doing a word search. Zen Sunni and Sufi. Mm-hmm. Living proof that strong enough fanaticism could endure for ages. Zen Sunni and the old Sufi survived in the Thylaxi. It was like a deadly microbe and that lay dormant for all those millennia. This is Heretics, I think, isn't it? Oh no, it's Chapter House. Which one? I think. Yeah, it's a combo, isn't it? There we go. Sorry, I just wanted to check that. Was that Chris saying about Zen Sunni? Yeah. I think Bijaz may be showing his Zen Sunni roots. Sorry, Chris, it was me checking my old memory. There's Zen Sunni and Sufi. The word plays like Zen koans, especially the finger pointing out the paradox of subject and object. Chris says, I think Duncan was trained as a Zen Sunni, and if I remember right, Bijaz had some relation to Duncan, so I thought that might be the connection. Oh no, you're correct, but it's the mystery, I think, of the Thylaxi. What are they at? And Christian, thank you, Cynthia. Like I say, it's been a bit, same for myself. Cynthia saying Chris and RC hate Duncan and Bijaz were grown in the same axolotl tank. Yes, they're kind of tank brothers, aren't they? it makes you wonder about Bijaz a fair bit, but ultimately, I suppose it's the religious nature of the Thylaxi that's a big mystery, and that's me jumping 3, 4, or 5 books down to try and dig that up just to check, Chris. So it's been a long time since I read them as well. The way I had it explained to me once was that if the difference kind of between and my kind of knowledge of this stuff kind of came from reading about Richard Francis Burton, who studied Sufism. Was the idea that if you like that, if imagine how does somebody put it, that imagine that say Sunni Islam, imagine that God's a flame. Does that make sense? And that the Sunnis would worship the flame and bask in its light, but the idea is that the Sufis would attempt to grasp it. Does that make sense? That's kind of it's a weird metaphor for it, I think, or analogy. It was the one kind of religion, if you like, Sufism that Richard Burton kind of thought might have been, and then he found it wanting, I suppose, in the end. But that's a good point actually about the Zen koans. So thank you very much. Sorry for me. I just wanted to check that. They do so that they would have Zen Sunni roots, but they're kind of Sufi as well. And that kind of makes you wonder a bit about the Golden Path and what they're up to with their plan here in this as part of this conspiracy. But we'll get a little bit of what Cynthia was saying about them hate and Duncan. We'll get a little bit of something coming up here in a second that kind of points that out. If you like, is kind of indicates a little bit that about what Bijaz really is, and I suppose the question of how much he knows. But Usul, you're the Atreides Emperor, Paul Muad'Dib, and you are my finger. And he held up his finger on his right hand. One night, Bijaz, you tempt fate. What is that? It could be from teaching authorities. It could have several meanings. Bijaz says, I tempt my finger. Bijaz protested, voice squeaking. I point at Usul. Is my finger not Usul himself? Or is it a reflection of something more base? And he brought the finger close to his eyes, examined it with a mocking grin, first one side and then the other. It's merely a finger after all. I think that's funny. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Dear. Dhuri, he often rattles on the Dhuri. Sorry, he often rattles on thus, Dhuri said, worrying in her voice. I think it's why he was discarded by the Tlaxu. We had that idea of Paul sort of rattling against the cage, didn't we? If you like, earlier. Bijaz says, I'll not be patronized, Bijaz said, yet I have a new patron. How strange the workings of the finger. He peered at Dhuri and Otheym, eyes oddly bright. A weak glue bound us, Otheym, a few tears and we part. And I've written next to this, no. Well, a few tears I've written is this water for the dead. But this is one of those things, and we'll consider this with Bijaz's nature. Is he prescient? Is he a Kwisatz Haderach? Is he a Gola? What is he? But just like Paul, if that's part of his prescience, and we'll see a little bit about this in a minute when Paul sort of interrogates him, it's a bit like the medics from the previous chapter. Nobody's going to cry here. There are no tears. A weak glue bound us, Otheym, a few tears and we part. So I've just written next to that, no. Well, I came back and wrote it actually because I waited to the end of the chapter to see. The dwarf's big feet rasped on the floor as he whirled completely around, stopped facing Paul. Ah, patron or patron, I came the long way around to find you. Paul nodded. You'll be kind, Usul, Bijaz asked. I'm a person, you know. Persons come in many shapes and sizes. This be but one of them. I'm weak of muscle, but strong to mouth, cheap to feed, but costly to fill. Empty me as you will, there's still more in me than men put there. And Dhuri here says, we've no time for your stupid riddles, Dhuri growled. You should be gone. I'm riddled with conundrums, Bijaz said, but not all of them stupid. To be gone, Usul, is to be a bygone, yes? Let us let bygones be bygones. Dhuri speaks truth, and I have the talent for hearing that too. So I wrote next to that, truth sense, truth sayer, question mark, turned the page, and then Paul said, you've truth sense. Paul asked, determined now to wait out the clockwork of his vision. Anything was better than shuttering these moments and producing new consequences. There remain things for Otheym to say, lest time be diverted into even more horrifying channels. That's a bit like what we were saying earlier. It really is like he's acting out a role, isn't it? It's not my time to leave stage yet. I've got to wait for Otheym to say his bit. If you see what I mean. I've no sense, Bijaz said. Paul nervous. So we start off with just a little worries, more nerves. We'll see that with some of the things here that that Frank assigns to Bijaz. A little bit more nervous. Was the little man aware of things about to happen? Could Bijaz be his own oracle? Now, when I'd asked that question previously, I'd kind of a couple of pages back, I'd asked myself, does Bijaz hide his presence by his own oracular ability, and is he a Kwisatz Haderach? I wrote down, aha, go Ross. I was so pleased with myself there. So they're good questions, and it's the same questions that Paul ends up asking. Now, did you inquire of Lichna? Otheym asked suddenly, peering up at Dhuri with his one good eye. And Dhuri replied, Lichna is safe, Dhuri said. No, she's not. And Paul lowered his head, lest his expression betray the lie. So this is his second lie of omission in relation to Lichna. Safe? Lichna was ashes in a secret grave. That is good then, Otheym said, taking Paul's lowered head for a nod of agreement. One good thing among the evils, Usul. I don't like the world we're making, you know. Sorry, I'll read that again. That's good then, Otheym said, taking Paul's lowered head for a nod of agreement. It's the second time that well, one of these Fremen within this household, both Otheym and Dhuri, have made an assumption, if you like, that turns out to be incorrect. One good thing among the evils, Usul. I don't like the world we're making. You know that. It was better when we were alone in the desert with only the Harkonnen for enemy. Pardon me. And of course, we know the irony of that statement. Paul is a Harkonnen. And it looks like Bijaz knows it too. This is what he says. There's but a thin line between many an enemy and many a friend, Bijaz said. Where that line stops, there's no beginning and no end. Let's end it, my friends. He moved to Paul's side, jittered from one foot to the other. So we've gone from worried to nervous to jittering. And I've written, does Bijaz know in that sense that Paul's a Harkonnen? I've just written next to it, he must do. Paul says, what's now sense? Paul asked, dragging out these moments, goading the dwarf. So again, he's kind of waiting. We're not supposed to go just yet. Let's just, let's get on with this. And it very much does seem like a role, doesn't it, that he's acting out, that the free will is gone. So what's now sense, Paul asked, dragging out these moments, goading the dwarf. No, Bijaz said, trembling. No. He tugged at Paul's robe. Let us go now. I've got to congratulate Frank Herbert on his Bangaria. That's a whole lot of exclamation marks in one. It's just something fun I like to point out. There you go. But he's got a whole pile there within less than 2 lines on the book, I think. Yeah. 4 exclamation marks, 2 lines. Heavy Bangaria. If anybody doesn't know, Bangaria is the overuse of exclamation marks in writing. I'm trying to remember who came up with it. Was it? Oh, goodness. That's a crime writer, I think, isn't it? If I can remember correctly. Bear with me a second. I'll tell you. It says Bangaria is trending. I don't know, because we have a town called Bangor here. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I've got a very tickly nose. It's a blend of bang and diarrhea. Just trying to think of it. Who did come up with it? It's just a fun thing, I think. No, I'm not seeing a source for it. I'll tell you what. Hang on. Let me see. What am I thinking on? I'm going to have to go to a samurai film to figure this one out. Hang on. Because I'm trying to think of a... Goodness great! No, I'm not. Well, the book that I was thinking on is not here in the discussion of it. Jimbo had a remarkable influence of various forms of entertainment, starting with a remake of A Fistful of Dollars. That's not what I was thinking of. Oh, it's an American crime writer. Sorry, I can't for the life of me think of who it is, but I'm pretty sure it was an American crime writer that came up with the idea. Bangaria it's just a kind of, I don't know, some writer, whoever came up with this idea thinks that you shouldn't have more than 3 exclamation marks in 80,000 words, if you like, for an 80,000 word novel. I do disagree, but I like pointing him out. It's when someone shouts or exclaims is when you put an exclamation mark. So Bijaz, it says Bijaz said, I would, trembling now. So we've gone from worried to nervous, if you like, to jittered to trembling. He's getting really shaky. But I would take that as no, no, let us go now. He'd be shouting at Paul rather than just, which would work with the tugging at Paul's robes. There's a real sense of urgency about him. And the question is, what's he know? What's he see? Otheym says his mouth rattles, but there's no harm in him. Otheym said, affection in his voice, the one good eye staring at Bijaz. And Bijaz, even a rattle can signal departure, Bijaz said, and so can tears. Let's be gone while there's time to begin. And again, nobody's crying. Paul asks, Bijaz, what do you fear? And this is what we're told. And I think this is in relation to what Cynthia was saying. I fear the spirit seeking me now, Bijaz muttered. Perspiration stood out on his forehead. His cheeks twitched. He's having a physiological reaction to this. I fear the one who thinks not and will have no body except mine. And that one goes back into itself. I fear things I see and the things I do not see. Now, it's just like Paul, but I've also written this. It's also like Duncan. And what I think Bijaz is talking about here. I fear the spirit seeking me now. The one who thinks not, doesn't think, and will have no body except mine. And that one goes back into itself. I think this is a bit like the original Bijaz and whatever personality the Thylaxu have imprinted on it, if you like. And what Bijaz fears really is becoming something else that's not him. Does that make sense? And that kind of matches up with Duncan, Chris is saying, laughing aloud, it's actually in the Urban Dictionary. Love it, Bangaria. Yeah, it's a portmanteau word, isn't it? It's a combination of bang and diarrhea. And it's a great word. It's just one of those fun things, but it's a bit silly, to be honest with you. Exclamation marks should be used when they're needed. And that's it, really. So I don't really have a problem with it, but it's just a fun thing to point out, Can't always all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So we've got to have our wee moments of fun. But it's a great word, and I like it. And I tend to, oddly enough, it's a thing a lot of writers would go that way with not. I think maybe it has become a thing, and a lot of writers might pay attention to it. I don't like the fact that you can't have an exclaimed shout. An exclaimed question in English punctuation. I think other languages have a question mark that can be combined with an exclamation mark, But you within English, you can what are you doing? You'd have to add he shouted, that kind of thing. But you can't have I don't see why not, to be honest with you. Language, develops and evolves and stuff. So I would happily I would love to stick a question mark next to an exclamation mark. But it's one of those things. But there we go. Paul's thoughts here: this dwarf does possess the power of prescience, Paul thought. Bijaz shared the terrifying oracle. Did he share the oracle's fate as well? How potent was the dwarf's power? Did he have the little prescience of those who dabbled in the Dune tarot? Or was it something greater? How much had he seen? The thing that with what Bijaz is going with the tears, by the way, was I think that's the little differences in Bijaz's prescience, if that makes sense. It's a bit like Paul expecting the call from the medics in the earlier chapter, and it never happens. Chani walks in and gives him the information from the medics, so they never appear in that chapter, but he's expecting them. Or is he? Or is maybe he's going through the role of pretending to expect them? It starts to really mess with your head, doesn't it? Dhuri, best you go, Dhuri said. Bijaz is right. Every minute we linger, Bijaz said, prolongs the present. And Paul's thoughts are, every minute I linger defers my guilt, Paul thought. And this is an interesting one here. A worm's poisonous breath, its teeth dripping dust, had washed over him. It had happened long ago, but he inhaled the memory of it now, spice and bitterness. He could sense his own worm waiting, the urn of the desert. That's interesting. Yeah, it happened long ago. I think, is that back to his memory of just taking the water of life, this kind of thing? Excuse me. The memory of its spice and bitterness. And bitterness is a thing I think we have heavy with the Fremen here and with Paul, I think. These are troubled times. This is Paul, by the way. These are troubled times, he said, addressing himself to Otheym's judgment of their world. And I made a wee note, this isn't really his world, is it? But what Otheym, what that's in response to is Otheym saying, I don't like the world we're making. You know that. It's the world we're making. It was better when we were alone in the desert with only the Harkonnen for enemy. So these are troubled times, he said, addressing himself to Otheym's judgment of their world. Now, in practical, Fremen know what to do in time of trouble, Dhuri said. And Otheym contributed a shaky nod. Paul glanced at Dhuri. He'd not expected gratitude, would have been burdened by it more than he could bear, but Otheym's bitterness and the passionate resentment he saw in Dhuri's eyes shook his resolve. Was anything worth this price? It's a good question. And whatever it is that he's trying to prevent, he's paying the price, isn't he? But other people are paying it for him too. Dhuri says, delay serves no purpose, Dhuri said. Otheym here. Do what you must, Usul, Otheym wheezed. So advice from these two Fremen. Delay serves no purpose. Do what you must, Usul. He wheezed that one out. Paul sighed. The words of the vision had been spoken. That's what he's been waiting for. And then he says this. So this is Paul. There'll be an accounting, he said, to complete it. Turning, he strode from the room, heard Bijaz foot slapping behind. And the last part of this chapter is spoken by Bijaz. Bygones, bygones, Bijaz muttered as they went. Let bygones fall where they may. This has been a dirty day. And there we go. And no tears. I've just written at the end of the chapter, no tears, and then the last wee bit is rhyming couplet Shakespearean, a bit like what who was it? Cynthia saying, Elizabethan gesture, cutting puns, play on words. Absolutely. He would remind you, I suppose, on for me, Lear's full. Who else? And I said the nature of the fact that he speaks in riddles, and we hear this, etc. And we have the overlay of the Oedipus myth. Strongly suggests this, he's the Sphinx here, if you like. And I the way he was talking about being such a base creature kind of reminded me on Caliban from Shakespeare's The Tempest, which is quite a good play, I think. Probably meant to be his last one, isn't it? But there we go, folks. We've made to the end of the chapter. It's been a pretty good one, I think, and it brings up all sorts of questions. And we've had all sorts of kind of dualities, if you like, dichotomies, paradox, the works, really. And in particular, I suppose, Paul's guilt over all this, the financial nature of Dhuri and Otheym, the state that they're in, the fact that this is one of his Fedaykin, one of his death commandos that probably should be in a position of exalted power, if you like, within this empire, and here he is living in a hovel. That they kind of chose this in a funny way. It's almost as if they've done this for Paul. But I suppose the other thing really is that, Otheym has caught this splitting disease, as we'll go with. On the Jihad itself, you can see the actions of the consequences, if you like, for individuals. Otheym's family, have to remember, is Lichna's dead. He's not in much of a state, and based on what happens very, very shortly. The danger, the sense of acceleration is increasing. We're not that much further. We're heading into the end of the book, and things are going to accelerate and pick up. And of course, we have, that's Otheym and Dhuri aren't going to survive this, are they? In fact, I suppose that's the other thing we were talking about, the different Korba and Otheym and Farrokh, and here we have Lichna and Dhuri, all Fremen from the siege days. There's none of them pretty much are left alive by the end of this book, and look what's become of the Fremen. And we see Fremen really falling on hard times in Suburbia. And certainly, whatever's happened, the splitting disease. I suppose it's interesting that there are diseases like this in the Dune universe, if you like, and that there's not medication or knowledge to deal with them. And Bijaz is quite an interesting character. And again, he's one that we can be, slightly. It depends on what we think of him, if you know what I mean. Doing some of this work and looking up the etymology, and what I did was I ended up hitting stuff that's Dune wikis, this kind of thing, and everything that they were saying about Bijaz is from Brian Herbert's books. Clearly, because I didn't recognize any of it, and I know that he doesn't make it out of this book. Pardon me. But he's an interesting character, and definitely. I think that the question is: does he provide his own? Does he distort his own presence with his prescience? Is he able to hide himself from oracles? This kind of thing. He's certainly an interesting character. And he kind of seems to have the same sort of awareness of his place with the how would I put it, that Duncan or that Hate does, if you see what I mean. The suggestion, I think, is that I asked a wee question a while back: what is a Thylaxu Kwisatz Haderach? How would that look? Why would they kill themselves? And what's their base starting point to create such a creature? If we run with the idea that the Bene Gesserit's kind of, if you want, first, as I sort of said, it's like a bit like a recipe. First start with a mentat, and then, because the Kwisatz Haderach is meant to be a super mentat, isn't he, really, as well? Paul asks a lot of the questions about Bijaz, I suppose, for us, but he's definitely cacking himself here. Something bad's going to happen. It's really good the way, we haven't really talked about this too much, but the way we build this sense of tension here within this chapter. I think, how was it put earlier? That this bit of time was kind of was it something like a gentle, something like a wee gentle wave or something? I can't quite remember how it was put, really. I can't quite. Yeah, there it is. The power. This is Paul, just sort of what's running through his head after how could he exploit the differences? Just to read this wee bit again. Time came out of its scheme with subtle changes, but the background fabric held oppressive sameness. He knew with terrifying certainty that if he tried to break out of the enclosing pattern here, it would become a thing of terrible violence. The power in this deceptively gentle flow of time oppressed him. This is the calm before the storm, I think, if you see what I mean. And the fact that Bijaz is, we see this change in him from a little bit of worry. It gets worse. He's trembling, he's shaking to the point where let's get the hell out of here. This kind of thing. It's kind of interesting. And if his prescience is the same as Paul's, Paul probably knows what's coming as well. But I think the interesting thing is about the tears. That's possibly a part of the next chapter. I think maybe I kind of just do the notes as I go. Literally a page at a time. That's why sometimes I'll literally write down something and I'll turn the page and I've But I think this is a great chapter, folks. I really enjoyed reading it. Bijaz is a really interesting character, and we'll go on all the way to the end with him as well. He's really important in his relationship with Duncan Idaho on the Tlaxu plot, and you kind of wonder, can we feel sorry for him as well? I fear the spirit seeking me now. I fear the one who thinks not. Well, Bijaz is a person that we're told, and he thinks, and will have no body except mine. Something that doesn't think and will own my body, and that one goes back into itself. I fear things I see and the things I do not. I wonder what that means, but it almost feels like a personality will take over at a certain point, I think, and that's what he really fears. And perhaps in the meantime, Bijaz is just playing a role the same as Paul, perhaps, and we're starting to see some of the consequences of Paul's actions. The fact that he's ordered rain, I think it's quite interesting, But there we go, folks. And I do apologise for being a day late with this stuff, but usually if I can't run on a Thursday night at 9 p.m. GMT +1, I'll try and run on the next day, Friday. Just gives me a wee bit more time. But it was basically this week I ended up with a whole bunch of taking on a whole bunch of extra students, just because we're heading to exam time, and I usually have a day free to do this kind of stuff, and I lost it. So just trying to get it done. I usually need 2 days work at this to get a chapter done. Our next chapter is not that as long, so hopefully we'll be on. It's nice and short, isn't it? It's a doozy. And again, the tension is building. So we'll definitely be on Thursday at 9 p.m. GMT +1 with the next chapter. But that's chapter 17, 18. We've got 24 in total. As far as I can tell, with an epilogue. We're pushing through the book. It's great. Hopefully, 18, 19. Hopefully, we'll be finished it in 6 weeks. And time for a bit of a break then, and then we'll be jumping on to Children of Dune, I think. But there we go, folks. Chris is saying this has been great. Thank you for hosting it. Not a problem, Chris. We're here every week, pretty much, usually with this stuff. We've completed. I don't know if you can see behind me. That's all the notebooks for Dune. Took 4 of them for our first book club. We've just finished one, and we're on to our second for Dune Messiah. But we've promised to go all the way through somehow, all 6 books if we can. But there you go, folks, and it's been fun. And thank you very much for your questions and stuff. I'm a bit pooped, so I'm going to wrap it up. But Chris, this has been great. Thank you for hosting it. No problem. That's what I do. And Cynthia said thanks as always. Thank you, Cynthia. And thanks to everybody for your contributions. And sorry if you couldn't make it tonight, but you'll catch me in the reruns, as they say, But in the meantime, thank you. And again, thanks a lot for checking. There's some, as I said, I've got 3 different versions of this book. And just to show you, there's the big split right down there. Oh, nearly lost a page there. So I got a big split between 126 and 127. Oh, and even a worse one on 124 and 125. So again, another book that might require a bit of tape. But no, I'm enjoying this. And there's Holly telling me woof woof bark bark say goodnight. Dog talking that right, Big Love? Oh, he's a gorgeous girl. So I better get on. I don't know if she's got her dental sticks or not. But I'll have to say goodnight, folks. So as always, thank you very much. We'll catch you hopefully on Thursday at 9 p.m. GMT +1. Our next chapter is chapter 18. Excuse me, and it's the one that begins with the epigraph: the convoluted wording of legalisms grew up around the necessity to hide from ourselves the violence we intend towards each other. That's where we'll be starting. It's just, I've got a wee note here, it's 7 pages, so I'll definitely get the work done. So in the meantime, I'll say good night. Thanks very much, everyone. Look after yourselves, no matter where you are, and be safe, and we'll see you real soon. Thank you very much for joining me. All the best now. Good night. Do 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 ba 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 ba